Tonight, we delve into a life that was less lived and more forged, hammered into existence like the very metal it shaped. We begin with the brutally hot, soot-covered existence of the medieval blacksmith, a man who, quite literally, laid the iron foundations of his world. Forget the romanticized cinematic portrayals, the slow-motion swings, and the majestically flying sparks. That's a gilded fantasy. The grim reality of a medieval blacksmith's life was a dirty, exhausting, blister-inducing hellscape of relentless labor, where every breath was a lungful of ash, and every dawn promised a new ache. And in most cases, it absolutely sucked. So, before you get too comfortable, a luxury few blacksmiths ever knew, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely find value in what we're doing here. And do me a favor, drop a comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always truly fascinating to see who's joining us from across the globe, sharing this journey through time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan to conjure a soft, distant hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together, into the crucible of a blacksmith's fate. You were born into the noble, soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths, though noble here means only necessary, and lineage means destiny. There were no crowns awaiting you, no vast lands to inherit, no fancy titles to bestow upon your name. Your inheritance was the roaring family forge, your birthright the pervasive scent of roasted iron baked so deeply into your baby blanket it might as well have been woven from it, and your future an endless parade of anvil-shaped blisters. From the moment your unsteady toddler legs could carry you without tripping into the perpetually hungry fire pit, you were expected to help. Not just help in the way a child might fetch a toy, but to become an extension of the workshop itself. By age 6, you were officially your father's apprentice, a polite medieval euphemism for a tiny, unpaid assistant with zero rights, a perpetually stained face, and a rapidly developing tolerance for deafening noise and searing heat. Your toys? A collection of oddly shaped tongs, maybe a discarded chisel. Your playground? A compacted dirt floor next to a furnace so ferociously hot it could singe your eyebrows from 5 paces. While other village kids chased squawking chickens through sun-dappled fields or skipped flat stones across the stream, you were learning how not to die next to molten metal. The fun games of your childhood included guess how hot this is with your bare hand. The answer was always too hot. Hold the hammer until your arms fall off. They always felt like they would. And try not to cry when you mess up the nail again, a challenge you rarely won. Your father, the blacksmith, was a terrifyingly muscular man, a walking slab of hardened sinew and granite-like resolve. His communication was sparse, his entire vocabulary seemingly reduced to guttural grunts, a measuring gaze, and the omnipresent, thunderous command, "Hit it harder." His hands, gnarled and thick, looked less like flesh and bone and more like the ancient, weathered bark of an oak tree, capable of crushing iron or shaping it with equal force. A permanent scowl was, "Hey guys, tonight we begin with the brutally hot, soot-covered life of a man who quite literally forged the medieval world, the blacksmith." You've probably seen them in movies, hammering glowing iron in slow motion with sparks flying majestically through the air, perhaps a noble knight overseeing their work, or a montage of muscular heroes effortlessly shaping steel. But trust me, being a real medieval blacksmith was nothing like a dramatic training montage or a romanticized historical epic. It was dirty, exhausting, blister-inducing work that attacked every sense and stole every moment of peace. And in most cases, it absolutely sucked. So, before you get too comfortable and allow me to completely shatter any lingering romantic notions, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, as the last vestiges of your cozy, modern comfort fade, dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft, almost industrial hum that might mimic the bellows in the distance, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Prepare to feel the heat, taste the ash, and hear the clang that defined an existence. You weren't just born into the noble, soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths. You were forged into it. No crowns, no sprawling lands, no fancy titles whispered with deference. Just the omnipresent shadow of the family forge, the rough, callous touch of your father, and the undeniable scent of roasted iron baked into the very fabric of your baby blanket. From the terrifying moment you could toddle without tumbling headfirst into the smoldering fire pit, you were expected to help. By age 6, you were officially your father's apprentice, which was merely a polite medieval euphemism for tiny, unpaid assistant with zero rights, an astonishing capacity for enduring pain, and permanent soot streaks decorating a face that should still be cherubic. Your toys weren't wooden swords or rag dolls. They were miniature tongs, crude hammers, and the unforgiving pieces of scrap metal you were tasked with sorting. Your playground wasn't a sun-dappled meadow, but a dirt floor next to a roaring furnace hot enough to singe the very eyebrows off your bewildered face. While other village kids chased squawking chickens through muddy lanes and skipped flat stones across the stream, you were learning the crucial, life-preserving lesson of how not to die next to molten metal. Tonight, we descend into a world not of noble kings or valiant knights, but of raw, unyielding labor, a world quite literally hammered into existence by the soot-stained hands of the blacksmith. Forget the romanticized flicker of a silver screen, the heroic figures striking glowing iron in a ballet of slow-motion sparks. That's a gilded fantasy. The reality of a medieval smith was a grimy, guttural symphony of raw endurance. It wasn't merely difficult. It was an existence perpetually coated in soot, sweat, and a pervasive, aching misery that tasted of iron and regret. This wasn't a dramatic training montage. It was a daily, blister-inducing war against metal and fire, and in most cases, it absolutely devoured you whole. So, before you settle in for this journey, perhaps dim the lights, and if you have one, flick on a fan. Let its soft hum be your only comfort in the stifling air we're about to enter. Take a moment to acknowledge the content if it truly resonates, and consider subscribing. Tell me in the comments where you are in the world, what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see how far these echoes of history can travel. Now, brace yourself. We're about to ease into a life that knows no ease. You weren't born into wealth or title, but into the ignoble, soot-covered lineage of medieval blacksmiths. No crown awaited you, no sprawling lands, no fancy parchment declaring your station. Just the cavernous maw of the family forge, hands predestined for anvil-shaped blisters, and the indelible scent of roasted iron baked so deeply into your swaddling cloths that it became the very air you breathed. From the moment your legs could steady themselves without toppling you into the ever-present fire pit, your tiny frame was expected to contribute. By age 6, you were officially your father's apprentice, a polite medieval euphemism for a diminutive, perpetually unpaid assistant, burdened with zero rights, an eternal layer of grime, and permanent soot streaks painting your innocent face. Your toys? Heavy, awkward tongs. Your playground? A dirt floor bordering a furnace hot enough to crisp your very eyebrows. While the other village children chased squawking chickens through muddy lanes or skipped flat stones across the stream, you were learning the far more vital skill of how not to die next to molten metal. The games here were less whimsical. Guess how hot this is, with your bare hand. Hold the hammer until your arms fall off, and try not to cry when you've ruined yet another nail. Your father, the blacksmith, was a terrifying, muscular force of nature, whose entire conversational repertoire consisted of monosyllabic grunts, the size of whatever object was in question, and the ubiquitous, thunderous command, "Hit it harder." His hands were gnarled like ancient tree bark, and a permanent scowl was etched onto his face, a roadmap of decades of smoke inhalation and the relentless squeeze of tax collectors. He taught you everything: how to coax rebellious iron into submission, how to feed the insatiable hunger of the fire, and, most importantly, how to keep your mouth shut and your gaze downcast when a night, full of himself and ale, deemed your painstaking work beneath contempt. You didn't dare ask questions. Inquiry was a luxury you couldn't afford. You observed, you absorbed, and you obeyed, mostly because a misplaced question would likely result in a flying horseshoe arcing towards your head, followed by a week of chilling, absolute silence. Holidays? A fanciful notion for those with leisure. You didn't get those. The forge, a living entity, demanded constant attention, ceaseless heat, and absolutely no breaks, and neither, by extension, did you. Someone, somewhere, always needed something sharpened, fixed, or reforged. You quickly learned that free time was merely the fleeting, anxious interval between one urgent task and the next. And while you were technically learning a trade, what you were truly mastering was an inhuman pain tolerance, an almost supernatural resistance to heat, and the unsettling ability to fall asleep standing up, even amidst the clamor. By the tender age of 10, you already carried the pungent scent of iron in your pores, swore with the raw eloquence of a seasoned miner, and possessed arms strong enough to haul water buckets heavier than any dog you might have owned, assuming the poor beast hadn't already fled the incessant din 2 years prior. This, then, was your life. Welcome to the family business. Hope you enjoy sweat, smoke, and the grim promise of 70 years of crippling back pain. If you harbored any naive notions of a few good years of innocent playtime before the relentless hammer of life descended, think again. Childhood, in the brutal crucible of a medieval blacksmith's world, was less a phase and more a brief, almost insulting suggestion. The very instant your scrawny frame could lift a water bucket without toppling over, you were drafted. Forget childish games, the simple joy of toys, or any fleeting concept of fun. Your playroom was a smoke-stained, drafty shed, a hazardous landscape teeming with wickedly sharp objects and the constant threat of open flames. Your jungle gym? A teetering rack of heavy tongs positioned precariously close to a pit of glowing, hungry coals. One wrong, clumsy step, and you were in for an unscheduled, searing lesson in how long your skin could sizzle before your father, ever vigilant, finally noticed. Your official job title might have been apprentice, but its true meaning was starker. Do everything no one else wants to do, and still expect to be yelled at anyway. You stoked the inferno, pumped the massive bellows until your lungs burned, swept the perpetually grimy floor, polished tools until they gleamed, briefly, res-tacked the endless supply of coal, and above all, tried desperately not to get impaled by a stray, falling horseshoe. All this, mind you, before breakfast. Your meager payment came in the form of coarse, often stale food, the occasional gruff, stern nod, and on truly rare occasions, a barely audible grunt of mild approval, which, in the taciturn language of the forge, translated roughly to, "You didn't completely ruin that today, surprisingly." Meanwhile, the village kids you once vaguely knew were out in the sun-drenched fields, perhaps idly throwing sticks or learning the gentle art of milking goats. You watched them, a profound envy twisting in your gut, even if they did carry the faint, earthy aroma of cheese and manure. They might grow up to be farmers or shepherds, humble professions, yes, but ones that involved significantly fewer glowing weapons and the constant, agonizing threat of surprise burns. You, on the other hand, were meticulously learning to hand-make nails. Nails, thousands upon thousands of them, bent, twisted, reheated, and hammered straight again and again until they were finally deemed sturdy enough to hold some lord's chicken coop together, a testament to relentless monotony. If you were truly lucky, your father might permit you the singular honor of swinging the hammer on your own, immediately after pointing out every single, minute flaw in your technique. And don't even think about uttering the forbidden phrase, "I'm tired." That concept simply didn't exist within the forge's suffocating walls. Fatigue was weakness. Burnout. That was for candles, not for you. You kept swinging, kept sweating, and kept a brave, if strained, smile on your face. Or at the very least, you kept the tears from showing. Because in the unyielding eyes of your master, who was also your father, you were no longer a child. You were a blacksmith in training. And that brutal training, you soon realized, would never, ever end. The forge wasn't merely where you worked. It was your entire existence, a living, breathing entity that dominated your senses, reshaped your very muscles, and irrevocably rewired your brain. By the time you were in your teens, it ceased to feel like a mere place. It felt like a formidable, hot, smoky, temperamental beast, one you were forever bound to feed, control, and fear. You knew its sounds by heart. The wheezing, asthmatic breath of the bellows, the violent hiss of searing iron plunged into cooling water, the sharp, percussive clang of hammer on metal echoing like a primal war drum. There was a brutal rhythm to it all, a raw, medieval symphony, and your body moved in time with it, whether you were fully awake or half asleep, guided by instinct. You stopped noticing the oppressive heat after a while, not because it grew easier to bear, but because you had simply accepted it, assimilated it into your very being, like gravity or the inescapable burden of taxes. You instinctively knew which stones surrounding the hearth would become too scorching to sit on, which coals burned quickest, and which treacherous parts of the dirt floor were secretly trying to murder your feet. Your skin, once pale, had darkened to a leathery shade, not from the sun, but from the relentless shroud of smoke. Your clothes, the same soot-stained tunic and heavy leather apron you wore every single day, smelled like a permanent concoction of scorched wool, stale grease, and unspoken desperation. You owned precious few things, but this forge, this infernal beast, you owned it. Not on paper, mind you. Your father still technically held the deed. But in practice, with every swing, every blister, every inhalation of smoke, it owned you. You began to forget what true silence sounded like. The hiss, the clang, the crackle, the roar, it was a constant, all-encompassing din. When, by some rare chance, the forge did fall quiet, it was almost unsettling, a profound absence. You'd find yourself twitching, your muscles anticipating a beat in a song you'd been forced to memorize since infancy. Your friends, assuming you'd managed to cling to any, rarely saw you. He's probably at the forge became your default, unquestioned status. You weren't merely a blacksmith, you were the forge. A two-legged, smoke-choked extension of fire and steel. And strangely, inexplicably, a part of you began to love it. Not the searing burns, not the throbbing blisters, not the bone-deep exhaustion, but the profound, satisfying feeling when a shape finally emerged exactly right. When the horseshoe slid perfectly onto the hoof. When the raw blade gleamed with a nascent, deadly beauty. When the stubborn metal, after endless struggle, finally bent to your unyielding will. For a fleeting, precious moment, you weren't just a perpetually soot-covered kid. You were a creator, a master crafter, an indispensable, grinding gear in the massive, medieval machine. Then, the moment would pass. The next urgent order would arrive, demanding attention, and the fire would roar anew. Time to get back to work. By the time your childhood friends were just beginning to stretch into their teenage limbs, your own body already felt like it had endured a siege. While they grew taller and stronger in youthful exuberance, you were becoming stooped, deeply scarred, and stiff beyond your years. Your arms, yes, they were thick with muscle, but not in the heroic, sword-lifting way of a knight. More like the arms of a teenager who had been repeatedly, mercilessly attacked by anvils. Your back, a veritable tragedy, was permanently hunched from hauling intractable metal and leaning over the infernal forge for countless hours each day. Your knees creaked like an ancient door every time you crouched. Your shoulders popped with a disturbing regularity every time you lifted a hammer, which was, essentially, every few seconds, making it a constant, grating part of your personal soundtrack. And your hands. Oh, your hands. You used to have fingers, once, long ago. Now, they were gnarled, iron-tipped claws. They were perpetually blistered, cracked, and stained with soot so deeply ingrained that even the mighty Nile couldn't wash it clean. Cuts were commonplace, burns a daily occurrence. And your fingernails? Half of them were permanently blackened, or worse, entirely missing. When someone offered you a piece of bread, you held it with the same excruciating delicacy you'd use to cradle a hedgehog made of glass, for every knuckle already felt cursed, a repository of chronic pain. There was no such concept as recovery time. Pull a muscle, keep working. Twist your wrist, use the other one, you fool. The forge didn't care that your elbow was screaming in protest. Iron certainly didn't wait politely while you rested. And let the medieval world, in all its brutal, smoky, and unforgiving glory, wasn't forged in grand castles or whispered in hallowed halls of power. It was hammered into existence, spark by painful spark, by the hands of a man utterly indispensable, yet universally overlooked, the blacksmith. Forget the romanticized cinematic portrayals, the slow-motion swings, the majestically arcing sparks, the hero's triumphant glow. That's a gilded fantasy. The raw truth of being a medieval blacksmith was a grimy, relentless, bone-shattering ordeal that, more often than not, simply and unequivocally sucked. Let's not ease into this. Let's plunge into the searing heart of it. Picture the scene. The flickering, orange glow of the forge, the rhythmic clang that echoes not with valor but with endless toil, the air thick with the acrid scent of scorched metal and human sweat. This isn't a story to be told under bright lights. This is a tale for the shadows, for the hushed reverence of shared hardship. You were born into this. Not a crown, not an estate, not even a comfortable cot. Your birthright was the family forge, its heat an inescapable presence. It stood a part of your very DNA. The noble lineage was a dark joke, for your only inheritance was a life of anvil-shaped blisters and the perpetual reek of roasted iron infused into your very swaddling clothes. From the precarious moment you could toddle without stumbling headfirst into the fire pit, you were expected to contribute. Expected being a euphemism for commanded. By the tender age of 6, you were officially your father's apprentice, a polite medieval term for a miniature, perpetually soot-streaked, unpaid assistant with precisely 0 rights and an infinite capacity for exhaustion. While other village children chased squawking chickens across sun-dappled fields or idly skipped stones across the creek, your toys were heavy tongs, your playground a perpetually damp dirt floor beside a furnace radiating enough heat to singe your nascent eyebrows. Childhood games for you involve practical, albeit terrifying, lessons. Guess how hot this is with your bare hand. Or hold the hammer until your arms fall off. Or the ever-popular try not to cry when you've ruined another nail. There was no gentle introduction to the trade, only a brutal immersion into the art of not dying next to molten metal. Your father, the master blacksmith, was a monument of muscle and menace. His hands, gnarled and thick as ancient oak bark, were scarred maps of decades spent battling hot iron. His face was a canvas of permanent scowls, etched by the unforgiving smoke and the ceaseless demands of tax collectors and entitled nobles. His instructional vocabulary was a sparse landscape of grunts, monosyllabic commands like size, or harder, and the implicit threat of a flying horseshoe if you dared to question his methods. You learned not through polite discourse, but through observation, absorption, and absolute, unquestioning obedience. Asking why was an invitation to a week of stony silence and the very real possibility of ducking a tool-turned projectile. Holidays? A foreign concept, a soft-bellied luxury you knew only by rumor. The forge cared nothing for saints' days or seasonal celebrations. It demanded perpetual feeding, perpetual stoking, perpetual output. Someone, always, needed something sharpened, fixed, or reforged. You quickly understood that free time was a phantom, merely the brief, precious gasp of air between one back-breaking task and the next. You were, on paper, learning a trade. In practice, you were mastering an iron will, an almost supernatural pain tolerance, an immunity to heat that bordered on the grotesque, and the invaluable skill of falling asleep standing up, hammer still loosely gripped, even as the world clamored around you. By the time you reached 10, your very essence was permeated with the forge. You reeked of iron and charcoal. Your language, learned from the gruff exchanges around you, was peppered with the colorful oaths of a seasoned miner. Your arms, though still boyish, possessed the tensile strength of an adult, capable of hauling water buckets heavier than any dog you might have owned, assuming it hadn't long since fled the ceaseless clamor 2 years prior. This, you understood with a chilling certainty, was your life. This was the family business, etched in sweat, smoke, and the grim promise of 70 years of crippling back pain. Any lingering childish hopes of leisurely play vanished as swiftly as sparks in the night. In the world of the medieval blacksmith, childhood was less a phase and more a fleeting, almost forgotten suggestion. The moment your small frame could lift a water bucket without toppling, you were officially drafted, your fate sealed. Games, toys, any whisper of simple, uncomplicated fun, these were luxuries belonging to another world. Your playroom was a perpetually smoke-stained shed, a labyrinth of sharp objects, glowing embers, and open flames. Your jungle gym was a precariously balanced rack of tongs adjacent to a pit of incinerating coal. A single misstep here wasn't a scraped knee. It was an unscheduled, searing lesson in exactly how long human skin could sizzle before your father's calloused hand, ever observant, finally intervened. Your official title, apprentice, was a cruel misnomer. What it truly meant was do everything no one else wants to do, and still be subjected to a torrent of curses and complaints. You stoked the raging fire until your forearms screamed. You pumped the bellows until your lungs burned and your chest ached. You swept the perpetually dusty floor, cleaned the encrusted tools, res-tacked the mountains of raw coal, and dodged falling horseshoes with the agility of a terrified field mouse. All this, before the first meager rays of dawn had fully pierced the grimy window opening. Your payment? Scraps of coarse bread, stern, silent nods of grudging acknowledgement, and the rare, coveted grunt of mild approval which, in the terse lexicon of the forge, translated to, "You haven't completely ruined my day today, you useless whelp." Meanwhile, the village children you once knew, those innocent souls who still smelled faintly of sun-warmed grass and childhood dreams, were out in the open fields. Perhaps they were throwing sticks for a mongrel dog, or clumsily learning the delicate art of milking a goat. You envied them with a fierce, burning ache, even if they carried the faint aroma of cheese and manure. Their paths might lead to humble lives as farmers or shepherds, jobs certainly lacking the glamour of knighthood, but also notably free from glowing weapons, blistering burns, and the constant threat of a misplaced hammer. You, on the other hand, were mastering the soul-crushing monotony of making nails. Nails, thousands upon thousands of them. Tiny, stubborn, unyielding pieces of iron that demanded to be bent, twisted, reheated, and hammered straight again and again until they possessed the precise, perfect rigidity required to hold together a lord's chicken coop. If the day was particularly auspicious, your father might permit you to wield a hammer on your own, but not before meticulously cataloging every single infinitesimal flaw in your form, your rhythm, your strength. And never, ever dare to utter the forbidden words, "I'm tired." Such a phrase was anathema in the forge. Fatigue was a weakness, a luxury for the privileged. Burnout was reserved for the candles that dimly lit the workshop. You kept swinging, kept sweating, kept a mask of grim determination on your face. Or at the very least, you kept the tears hidden where no one, especially your father, could see them. For in the unyielding eyes of your master, who also happened to be your dad, you were no longer a child. You were a blacksmith in training, and the training, you instinctively knew, would never, ever end. The forge ceased to be merely a place of work. It became your entire existence, a living, breathing entity that dominated your senses, reshaped your muscles, and rewired your very brain. By the time you were just stepping into your teens, it wasn't just a structure. It was a hot, smoky, temperamental beast that you had to feed, control, and fear with a primal instinct. You knew its every sound by heart. The wheezing sigh of the bellows as it greedily drew breath, the violent hiss of searing iron plunged into cooling water, the sharp, percussive clang of hammer on metal echoing like a primal war drum through the oppressive air. There was a brutal rhythm to it all, a relentless medieval symphony that your body, whether awake or half asleep, moved in time with. Eventually, you stopped consciously noticing the oppressive heat, not because it lessened, but because you had simply absorbed it, accepted it as an immutable law of your universe, as constant and inescapable as gravity or taxes. You developed an innate knowledge, which floor stones would scald through your worn boots, which coals burned quickest, and which parts of the workshop floor harbored unseen cracks and unevenness, seemingly conspiring to murder your feet. Your skin, permanently darkened not by the sun but by layers of ingrained soot, spoke volumes of your life. Your clothes, the same sweat-soaked tunic and stiff leather apron you wore day in and day out, carried the indelible stench of scorched wool, animal grease, and a profound, bone-deep desperation. You owned little in this world, but in a strange, twisted sense, you owned this forge. Not on parchment or by legal right, of course. Your father still technically presided over its operations. But in the grim, inescapable reality of your daily life, the forge owned you. Silence became an alien concept, a forgotten melody. The constant hiss, the clang, the crackle, it was the omnipresent soundtrack of your existence. When, on rare occasions, the forge did fall quiet, it was almost profoundly unsettling. Your muscles would twitch, your senses would feel bereft, as if you'd lost a crucial beat in a relentless song you'd been forced to memorize since infancy. Your friends, assuming the relentless demands of the forge had allowed you to retain any, saw you only in fleeting glimpses. He's probably at the forge became your default status, your defining characteristic. You weren't merely a blacksmith. You were the forge itself, a two-legged extension of fire and steel, a living, breathing tool. And then, almost imperceptibly, a strange, profound affection began to bloom within you. Not for the burns, not for the endless, weeping blisters, but for the exquisite moment when a shape finally emerged from the raw metal exactly as you envisioned. When a horseshoe, hammered true, fitted a hoof with seamless precision. When a blade, hours in the making, gleamed with a cold, polished brilliance that caught the flickering firelight. When the unyielding iron bent, at last, to your indomitable will. In that fleeting, transcendent instant, you weren't just a soot-covered boy. You were a creator, a master craftsman, an absolutely indispensable gear in the sprawling, grinding machinery of the medieval world. But the moment, like a spark, was ephemeral. The next order would arrive, the bellows would roar again, and the beast of the forge would demand its due. It was always time to get back to work. While your peers were still awkwardly growing into their teenage limbs, yours already felt as if they had endured a protracted siege. As they gained height and youthful strength, you acquired a permanent stoop, a patchwork of scars, and a pervasive stiffness that settled deep into your bones. Your arms were thick, but not with the graceful power of a knight wielding a sword. No, yours possessed the crude, battered bulk of a teenager who had been repeatedly assaulted by anvils. Your back was a tragedy in the making, permanently hunched from years of hauling impossibly heavy metals and leaning over the forge's inferno for hours on end. Your knees groaned and creaked with every crouch, sounding like dry branches in a strong wind. Your shoulders popped with an audible click every time you lifted a hammer, which was every few seconds, the sound now an ingrained part of your personal, constant soundtrack. And then there were your hands. Oh, your hands. Once, perhaps in a long-forgotten childhood dream, they had been soft, unmarred. Now, they were ruined. Your fingers, gnarled and distorted, had themselves become tools, stiff, swollen, perpetually cracked, and calloused to the point where they registered little sensation save for the sharp, searing stab of pain. You couldn't even hold a quill, let alone guide it with any grace. They were iron-tipped claws, blistered, perpetually grimy with soot so deep that the mighty Nile itself couldn't cleanse it. Cuts were an hourly occurrence, burns a daily ritual. Your fingernails? Half of them were permanently blackened or simply missing, ripped away by some errant piece of metal. When offered a simple piece of bread, you cradled it with the same excruciating delicacy you would use to hold a hedgehog made of glass, for every knuckle felt perpetually cursed, every joint in agony. There was no concept of recovery time. Pulled a muscle? Keep working. Twisted a wrist? Use the other one. The forge was an indifferent master. It didn't care that your elbow screamed in protest or that your knees throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. Iron didn't wait politely while you rested your weary body. And sleep? That was a cruel parody of rest. You'd think that a day filled with the brute force of hammering and hauling would lead to instant, blissful unconsciousness. But no, your muscles throbbed with such an intense, widespread agony that lying still was impossible. Your ears still rang with the phantom symphony of 10 hours of clanging metal. Your arms twitched with phantom swings, as if you were still sparring with unseen ghosts in your restless dreams. You ached in places you didn't even know possessed the capacity for pain. You didn't just feel pain, you smelled like it. Even your pain seemed to have its own deeper, more profound pain. And your father's response to your suffering? A curt, dismissive nod and the chilling words, "Good. You're learning." In a strange, twisted way, he wasn't wrong. You weren't growing despite the pain. You were growing because of it. You were being forged, hardened like the very metal you worked, shaped by the relentless heat, the crushing pressure, and the ceaseless repetition. But make no mistake, by the time you reached the fragile precipice of adulthood, your body already felt like it had lived 2 full lives and died halfway through both. And the worst, most terrifying part of all, you were just getting started. In most professions, smoke is a problem, an inconvenience. In your job, it was a co-worker, and a particularly rude, omnipresent one. The forge wasn't just hot. It was a choking chamber, a perpetually smog-filled dungeon. Every breath you drew was seasoned with the pungent, suffocating aroma of coal dust, scorched metal, acrid ash, and a pervasive sense of regret. If you could see clearly more than 6 feet ahead, it was a sure sign that someone, miraculously, had forgotten to light the fire. There was no proper chimney, merely a crude hole in the roof, which seemed to leak far more smoke in than it ever allowed out. You might consider opening a window, but there was no window to open. Only soot-blackened walls, the persistent rasping cough of your father, and the occasional gust of wind that merely served to blow the choking particulate directly into your eyes. Your lungs, let's just say, had entered a long-term, irreversibly toxic relationship with smoke. At first, the smoke burned, a sharp, searing irritation. Then it dulled, a persistent, rasping annoyance. Eventually, it simply became normal, an unremarked upon constant. Coughing fits became part of the forge's brutal rhythm, as natural as the clang of the hammer. Black mucus, while undeniably repulsive, was just another predictable, consistent byproduct of your day. You reached a point where clean air felt foreign, even suspicious. Your very voice transformed, deepening into a gravelly rasp, sounding like a 60-year-old goat farmer who subsisted solely on boiling tar. Words became scratchy, breaths grew shorter, and your throat felt perpetually coated, as if hosting a never-ending dust storm. Yet you continued to work because you had no other choice. And it wasn't just the charcoal smoke. There was metal dust from grinding, oily fumes from quenching, and the noxious scent of burnt leather, charred wood, or whatever unfortunate material had inadvertently dropped into the glowing coals. By noon, you had likely inhaled 3 different types of insidious poison. Protective gear? A laughable fantasy. The best you could manage was a ragged cloth tied haphazardly across your face. Even this meager barrier quickly became saturated with sweat and grime, smelling somehow even worse than the smoke it was meant to filter. Taking it off brought a fleeting relief from the gagging, but paradoxically it made breathing feel even harder, as if your lungs had become accustomed to the heavy resistance. Long-term damage, of course, was an inescapable certainty. Chronic asthma, the insidious creep of black lung, and the grim prognosis of an early death, all part of the standard career package. but you weren't thinking about the distant future. Your focus was on the immediate, the pressing, the finishing of that gate hinge before your father noticed its slight, damning crookedness. In the world of a medieval blacksmith, air wasn't a life-giving necessity. It was just another burden, another impediment. You didn't breathe to survive. You breathed to keep hammering. By now, you had developed an intimate, complex relationship with your tools, a bond forged in a crucible of pain, necessity, and a healthy dose of mutual disrespect. Your hammer, an extension of your very arm, was almost sentient. You had named it, cursed it, and swung it so many times that your shoulder now clicked with every raise, like a haunted maraca in a silent crypt. But without it, you were merely a sweaty man in a smoke-filled hut, a ghost. The hammer made you a blacksmith, and it also made you bleed with monotonous regularity. Then there were your tongs, clumsy, perpetually hot, and always pinching you at precisely the worst possible moment. You had burned your fingertips more times than you had successfully picked up an unyielding piece of iron. The metal would slip, the grip would fail, and you would yell in frustration, only for your father's booming voice to cut through the din. "Grip it like you mean it, boy." In that moment of intense vexation, you'd often fantasize about throwing the wretched things into the very fire, just to teach them a lesson. Your chisel, once a proud, sharp edge, was now mostly a blunt suggestion of a blade, warped and worn from countless tasks, shaping metal, splitting kindling, scraping scale, and even, on occasion, prying open a neighbor's stubborn door when their lock mechanism inevitably failed. Files, awls, punch tools, rivet sets. Your tool bench was a chaotic, dangerous tableau, resembling nothing so much as a medieval torture rack. And in truth, it was. You had been jabbed, crushed, pinched, sliced, and even impaled by every single item you possessed. Your fingers had developed a preternatural memory, flinching reflexively at the mere sight of a new tool. Your apron, a thick, stiff piece of leather, was meant to protect you. And in a way, it did, if protect meant catching hot metal shards and holding them close to your body in a smoldering, agonizing hug. It was more scorched than stitched, the leather stiffening into a cadaverous rigidity with every winter cold snap. Yet, despite all the injuries they inflicted, you cared for these tools with a devotion bordering on reverence, as if they were family. You sharpened their edges, oiled their joints, and lined them up meticulously each night. For if even one broke, you were done. You couldn't work. You couldn't earn. You couldn't eat. No tool, no income. So, yes, your tools were your lifeblood. But don't be fooled. They had also, unequivocally, declared war on your fingers, your spine, and your very sanity. Every day, they seemed to whisper, "We help you survive, but we will also slowly, meticulously destroy you." And every day, you would simply grunt back, "Yeah, that sounds about right." Now pass the hammer. You didn't wear a crown, or carry a gleaming sword, or command vast armies. But without you, the entire village would grind to a halt by Tuesday. You were the blacksmith, the linchpin, and everyone needed you, all the time, for everything imaginable. You were the medieval equivalent of customer service, tech support, and roadside assistance, all rolled into one perpetually soot-covered figure who invariably smelled of smoke and, at times, a quiet shame. The knight, fresh from a skirmish, needed a new sword forged. You made it. The farmer, cursing his luck, broke a plowshare mid-furrow. You fixed it. A monk's bell cracked, silencing its mournful toll. A baker's oven door jammed, threatening to ruin an entire batch of bread. A shepherd's gate latch refused to close, risking his flock. Guess who received the frantic, often demanding summons? That's right, you. Every single time. And they all arrived with an air of entitled expectation, as if you existed solely to cater to their sudden, urgent whims. They would burst into your forge unannounced, interrupting your swing, covered in mud and radiating impatience. "I know you're busy," they'd begin, their tone contradicting their words. "But could you just—" That phrase, "could you just," became the haunting refrain of your working life. And here's the most galling part. You were almost never thanked. They simply assumed it was your inherent duty, that you had been born into this world solely to serve their needs. If their hoe worked, their door closed, or their shield held, they would offer a curt nod and walk away, as if you were the lucky one, privileged to mend their rusty bucket at sunset for half a loaf of stale bread. Payment was a fickle, inconsistent beast. Sometimes it was a few meager coins, sometimes goods you barely needed, and all too often, just promises that vanished like morning mist by the next market day. One man once paid you with a dead chicken, claiming it was good for soup. It decidedly was not. You were also the ubiquitous fixer for problems that had absolutely no business being yours. Bent hinges from some lout sitting on a gate. You fixed it. A broken dagger, snapped in a drunken brawl. You fixed it. A mysterious, unidentifiable piece of twisted iron that someone insisted, with desperate urgency, must be fixed? Yep, still you. Yet, when the village gathered to praise anyone, it was invariably the knight for his valor, the priest for his piety, or the miller with his obscenely fat goat. You? You were background noise, a necessary function, a reliable tool, never a person. But here was the secret, the bitter truth you held close, never daring to voice it aloud. You knew. You knew they couldn't last a week without your tireless work. Their fields would stall. Their homes would crumble. Their horses would limp. Their carts seize. Their very lives unravel. And while they might never compose songs about your deeds, their entire fragile world was quietly, painstakingly held together by your scarred, calloused hands. You would think that peace, the absence of marauding raiders, the silence of bandits, the lack of screaming noblemen demanding a new, gleaming sword by sundown, would be a welcome respite, a blessing. But for you, peace was a catastrophic blow to business. Because while you might forge plows and repair hinges, what truly paid the bills, what filled your belly and kept the roof over your head, was war. When fighting erupted, everyone, suddenly, needed you. Weapons had to be crafted, armor mended, arrowheads forged by the hundreds. Even horseshoes wore down at an alarming rate under the relentless weight of panicked cavalry charges. You would be flooded with work, the forge burning brighter, the coins finally rolling in. Exhaustion would still be your constant companion, but for a precious few months, your belly would be full, and your mounting debt at the alehouse, momentarily forgotten. But then, inevitably, the war would end. The local lord would declare a truce, the knights would cease their marching, and your orders would vanish as quickly as they'd appeared. No more swords, no more helmets, just a farmer asking if you could sharpen a rusty sickle, perhaps offering 3 onions as payment. And yes, you could always make household goods, cauldrons, door handles, cooking spits, but there was precious little profit in such mundane items. Everyone expected you to work with the skill and speed of a wizard, but they insisted on paying you like a stable boy. You were forced to become a negotiator, a beggar, and a merchant all at once, haggling for decent wages as if your forge were just another stall in the bustling market square. And don't even consider raising your prices. People would look at you as if you had just cursed their prize cow. But you're just hammering metal. They would scoff, completely oblivious, as if molten iron magically bent itself into elegant shapes while singing church hymns. You found yourself, perversely, beginning to miss the chaos. Not the spilled blood, not the burning villages, but the steady, predictable flow of orders, the undeniable sense of purpose, the exhilarating rush of being truly indispensable. When knights, with their dented shields and ready coin purses, lined up outside your forge, you mattered. Now, you were making keys for doors no one bothered to lock, patching pots that should have been thrown out years ago, and repairing tools so ancient they belonged in a museum, not a farmer's field. For everyone else, peace meant safety and much-needed rest. For you, it meant crippling economic anxiety and the gnawing pangs of hunger. And deep down, though you would never, ever articulate it aloud, a dark, cynical whisper would often stir within you. Wouldn't mind a small skirmish. Just a little one. Perhaps a minor border dispute. Because when swords broke, you ate. Some jobs, mercifully, have a clear end, a finish line where a task is completed, followed by a moment of rest, perhaps even applause, or at the very least, a warm bowl of stew. Blacksmithing was not one of those jobs. Your work was never truly done. Not today, not tomorrow, not even in the restless, half-formed images that haunted your dreams. You would fix one thing, and almost instantly, 3 more would break. Patch a gate hinge, and the wheel would fall off the village cart. Finish a batch of nails, and someone would appear, demanding 10 more, but longer this time. And oh, by the way, they couldn't pay you until the harvest. You rose before the sun had even begun to hint at dawn, and you finally collapsed into bed long after it had disappeared behind the distant trees. Even then, your brain refused to quiet, kept hammering away. You dreamed of wheezing bellows, of showering sparks, of that one infuriating customer who still owed you a half-dozen eggs and a long-overdue thank you. Even the quick jobs never were. A villager would walk in, holding a mangled rake, insisting, "It just needs a little fixing." But you knew. That little fixing was 2 hours of patient reshaping, reheating, hammering, and nodding politely as they inquired, "Is it ready yet?" Every 5 minutes, their impatience a dull, persistent drill. And just when you thought you might finally sit, perhaps drink something that wasn't lukewarm and permeated with smoke, your apprentice would come running, breathless. "The friar's ill. You need to shoe the horse." Of course you did, because you were the blacksmith. And in this world, blacksmith was synonymous with everyone else's last, desperate resort. The forge itself demanded constant, unwavering attention. The fire refused to stoke itself. The tools, if ignored for even a day, would begin to rust and seize. Your anvil would subtly shift in the oppressive summer heat. Your bellows would crack and stiffen in the unforgiving winter cold. Everything was either actively falling apart or constantly threatening to. Even holidays offered no genuine reprieve. Sunday was, technically, a day of rest. Unless, of course, someone's ox cart broke down on the perilous journey to market. Then, suddenly, you were in your apron, half awake, praying the village priest wouldn't walk by as you hammered away, desecrating the Lord's day. You didn't keep a to-do list. Such a thing implied a point when everything would be neatly crossed off, a state of completion. There was no such point. Blacksmithing wasn't a job. It was an eternal, grinding cycle. Work, fix, repeat, over and over, until your body finally gave out, or your hammer, at long last, surrendered. And the most unsettling part? You found that, in your own twisted way, you kind of loved it. You might reasonably assume that pounding searing hot iron all day would, at the very least, earn you 2 fundamental things, a nourishing meal and a solid night's sleep. You would be utterly, tragically wrong. In the relentless life of a medieval blacksmith, food and rest were not guaranteed necessities. They were luxuries, as rare and coveted as clean water or a truly polite customer. Let's discuss food first. You toiled from the first whisper of dawn until the last vestige of sunlight vanished beyond the horizon, burning calories with the ferocious intensity of a runaway horse. And what was your reward? A meager piece of coarse, often stale bread. A bowl of cold pottage that might, if you were exceedingly lucky, contain a few chunks of yesterday's turnip. And perhaps, just perhaps, a small, stringy bit of salted pork if it happened to be a truly special day. Which, inevitably, it wasn't. You ate standing, one hand still unconsciously clutching tongs, the other instinctively shielding your meager meal from the ever-present ash and soot drifting from the forge. Meals were rushed, utilitarian affairs. Conversations, when they occurred, were guttural grunts. And if someone dared to knock on the door mid-bite because their wretched gate latch was stuck again, well, that cold stew was about to get even colder. You didn't eat for pleasure, you ate to survive. Fuel in, hammer out. That was the unyielding equation of your existence. Now, let's talk about sleep, or rather, the cruel, mocking parody of it. When you finally dragged your aching body into bed, a straw-stuffed sack that was always either too lumpy, too flat, or mysteriously teeming with unseen crawling things, your hands would throb with an insistent, dull ache. Your back felt as if it had lost a protracted bar fight. Your ears were still ringing, vibrating with the echoes of 10 hours of iron symphonies. Your blanket, a scorched wool sheet, carried the faint, indelible scent of forged smoke, stale ale, and a profound, bone-deep regret. And just as your eyelids grew heavy, your exhausted brain would, with malicious precision, dredge up that one order you forgot to finish, or that hinge that cracked in a peculiar, unsettling way, or the payment you still hadn't received for that blasted wagon wheel 3 weeks ago. Sleep became a desperate, nightly negotiation. You would lie awake, tossing and turning on your wretched pallet, your mind racing, calculating how much longer you could possibly delay those critical repairs without someone inevitably banging on your door at the first hint of dawn. And then there were the midnight surprises. Someone's horse would throw a shoe with a panicked clatter. A sudden storm would rip a door off its hinges, sending splinters flying. Or, inevitably, a noble's sword would urgently need sharpening before an impromptu hunt, because clearly, you, the blacksmith, had no need for rest whatsoever. You learned to survive on scraps and snatches, stolen bites, half-naps snatched in the brief quiet moments, and sheer, bloody-minded stubbornness. Because in your world, productivity always came before nourishment, and relentless deadlines always trumped desperate dozing. Food and sleep weren't breaks from the job. They were mere intermissions between hammer swings. You would eat when you could, sleep when you were allowed, and hope, with every fiber of your being, that the fire didn't die out while you were dreaming. There had been a time, long ago, in the dim, distant memory of childhood, when your hands were soft. Now, they were utterly ruined. Your fingers themselves had become tools, stiff, swollen, permanently cracked, and calloused to the point where they registered little beyond the constant throb of pain. The delicate touch, the nuanced sensation of fine things, these were long gone. You couldn't even hold a quill, let alone guide it with any semblance of grace. Your hands, once capable of such delicate work, now protest every simple command. You can barely manage the intricate lacing of your worn boots, your stiff fingers fumbling with the leather straps, each not a small, frustrating battle. Yet, those same mangled hands, tough as old leather, can pluck a glowing red-hot iron bar from the forge with the casual, almost bored, confidence of someone who has stared into the maw of the fire countless times. Pain, for you, is no longer a sensation but a dull, constant hum, a background noise to the rhythm of the hammer. It lost its meaning seasons ago, blunted by an endless assault of heat and impact. Every morning, as you try to clench them, every joint in your hand snaps and crackles like dry kindling. Your knuckles, swollen and misshapen, look less like part of a human hand, and more like they've been repeatedly introduced to a hammer in a back-alley brawl. Your palms are a living tapestry, a meticulously etched map of blisters, old, new, overlapping and fused, forming ridges and valleys like the rings of an ancient tree. Need to know what season it is without looking at the sun? Just count the fresh ones. More than 5, and it's undoubtedly summer, the forge raging hotter, the sweat flowing heavier, the work never ending. You've sacrificed fingernails to the forge gods more times than you can count. Some simply detached, a clean, sharp pang. Others tore away, taking with them slivers of flesh, leaving behind raw, throbbing wounds that clung to bandages for weeks. Once, you crushed your thumb so savagely between hammer and steel that it swelled to twice its size and turned a terrifying shade of midnight black for 2 agonizing weeks. Most men would have stopped, cried out for a healer. You just switched the hammer to your other hand, grunted a bit more than usual, and continued working until the sun dipped below the horizon. Cuts are a daily ritual. Sometimes it's the unforgiving kiss of a chipped edge on a newly sharpened blade. Sometimes a file, slick with oil and sweat, bites into your flesh as you work it against metal. And sometimes, it feels like the very iron you're trying to tame fights back, leaping or twisting in your grasp, leaving its mark. Every single week, without fail, something on you leaks blood. You've got a routine for it now. Grab a scrap of stained cloth, knot it tightly around the fresh wound, curse under your breath, a low, guttural growl that no one really hears, and return to the anvil. The work doesn't stop for a little blood. But worse, far worse, are the burns. Some are just mild, crimson reminders, little ghost kisses from a stray spark or a glancing touch of cooling metal, harsh lessons, for iron does not forgive. Others are truly heinous, the kind that hiss and sizzle as they form, the skin bubbling and blistering, leaving behind ugly, puckered scars that tell their own silent, fiery stories. You've branded yourself, accidentally or through sheer carelessness born of exhaustion, more times than any cattle farmer has branded his herd. And at this point, you're not even angry about it. The sting is just another familiar companion, an expected part of the day. Strangely, your raw grip strength is the only physical attribute that seems to have improved. You can crush a stubborn walnut between your thumb and forefinger with the casual ease of a man collecting a long overdue debt. But dexterity? That's a ghost from another life. You drop things constantly, tools, coins, even your supper spoon. And when the bitter chill of winter bites, your fingers tremble uncontrollably, a fine, ceaseless tremor. You're barely 30 years old, yet your hands, gnarled and scarred, tell a tale of a grizzled 70-year-old knight, one who has weathered 3 brutal wars and now spends his twilight years rolling dice in a smoky tavern, hoping to win enough for a bowl of watery soup. Despite this daily torment, these broken, battered hands are your lifeline. They are the instruments that coax raw metal into gleaming swords, mend broken hinges, and wield the mighty hammer that shapes not just iron, but your very reputation in the village. They ache, they throb, they burn, constantly. But they work. Because in this harsh life, it matters little how mangled and broken your body becomes, as long as you can still raise that hammer and swing it with purpose. And let's be entirely honest, your personal aroma isn't exactly charming. In fact, you haven't truly smelled clean since you were 5 years old, before your small hands first learned the heat of the forge. The very moment you became your father's apprentice, your personal fragrance signature took a permanent, irreversible turn, a pungent cocktail of unwashed ashtray, burnt bacon, and a faint, lingering desperation. Welcome, my friend, to the inescapable reality of blacksmith life. Here, no matter how vigorously you scrub with harsh lye soap and cold well water, you will forever carry the indelible scent of fire. The forge roars and consumes wood and coal all day, and in a way, so do you. The thick, acrid smoke doesn't merely cling to your clothes. It seeps into the very fibers of your tunic, your coarse hair, the deep pores of your skin, becoming a part of you. Even your sweat, thick and gritty, no longer carries the simple tang of exertion. Now, it's a complex, smoky bouquet, like cured meat accidentally left out too long during a humid spring afternoon. You could, theoretically, indulge in a proper bath. But baths are a rare, almost mythical luxury. The water is often frigid, and you're already toiling 6 days a week, covered in a fresh layer of soot, grease, and metallic dust before the sun has even fully cleared the eastern ridge. So what truly is the point? You'd be just as filthy again by the time breakfast was served. Your clothes offer no sanctuary from the pervasive scent. You wear the same singed tunic and scorched leather apron day in and day out. They haven't known true cleanliness since the last village festival, and even then, some clumsy oaf spilled stale ale on them before noon. Now, they simply hang on your frame, a hardened, protective layer of accumulated funk, a second skin of labor and grime. You once, foolishly, tried to mask it with a splash of cheap perfume, a gift from a traveling merchant. It lasted maybe 10 minutes before the hungry maw of the forge devoured it whole, leaving only a faint, sweet, quickly forgotten memory. Flowers wilt noticeably faster when you pass them. Freshly baked bread goes stale in your vicinity before its time. Cats, usually friendly, arch their backs and hiss softly as you walk by. And the worst part of it all? People notice. You step into the dim, smoky warmth of the tavern, and the crowd subtly parts, like the Red Sea before a prophet. The innkeeper, a man of long experience and keen olfactory senses, already anticipates your arrival. He gestures you towards a secluded corner table, ideally near an open window. It's not out of courtesy, it's a matter of sheer social survival. No one, not even the village drunkard, wants to share a close bench with the living, breathing embodiment of a burnt fence post. Still, you accept it with a shrug. A little social distance, a bit of shame, is far better than going completely unnoticed. You are known. When you walk past, you hear the hushed whispers. That's the blacksmith, spoken with a curious blend of grudging respect and perceptible nasal discomfort. You might not be the most charming conversationalist in town, but you are, undeniably, the most aromatic. Besides, you've learned to wear the scent like a badge of honor. Smelling like fire means you've been working, toiling over the anvil. Smelling like raw iron means you've been crafting, shaping the necessities of life. And smelling like sweat-soaked leather dipped in soot and regret? Well, that just means you're a professional. This life, this relentless cycle of heat and hammer, was never truly your choice. The forge, with its insatiable hunger and searing embrace, chose you. Its silent decree passed down through your father's own gnarled, calloused hands. The unspoken, iron-hard expectations were bequeathed to you like a rusty, immutable heirloom. And now, the cycle continues, with you as its reluctant, weary steward. Your son, a small, quiet shadow, doesn't chase imaginary dragons with carved wooden swords through sun-drenched fields. His childhood is spent within the fiery confines of the smithy. He fetches heavy buckets of coal, his small body straining. He pumps the great bellows, keeping the inferno alive. He holds the red-hot tongs steady, his face averted as a shower of molten sparks rains down. And you, ever vigilant, mutter, "Don't flinch, boy. Keep him steady." He can be no older than 7, yet already he carries the faint, unmistakable scent of burnt metal and damp, discarded burlap. A flicker of guilt, cold and quick, passes through you. But it's only a flicker, quickly extinguished. You aren't being cruel, you tell yourself, as much as it might appear so to an outsider. You are preparing him. This is the trade. This is survival. He watches you swing the heavy hammer, his wide eyes a mixture of awe and nascent fear, reflecting the furious dance of the sparks. You remember that exact look, don't you? It's the same one you used to fix upon your own father, who, in your young eyes, seemed an unyielding mountain of strength and authority. Now, you finally understand. He wasn't made of stone. He was forged of pure exhaustion and crushing responsibility. You teach the boy everything, every secret whispered by the metal. How to gauge the precise temperature of the iron by the subtle shift in its color, cherry red, orange, white hot. How to tap, not slam. To persuade the metal, not brutalize it. How to listen to the whisper and ring of the steel as it yields to your will. You shout sometimes, your voice raw from habit more than actual anger. Hold it right. That's too cold, boy, back in the fire. Don't cry. It's only a burn. You try to soften the edges of this harsh reality when you can. A whispered story by the dying embers of the fire after a long day. A precious piece of dried fruit, painstakingly saved when you can afford such a luxury. But tenderness, like a delicate flower, withers quickly in the forge. There's simply too much work to do, too many mouths to feed, too many tools to mend. His hands, soft with childhood, will soon grow calloused and scarred, mirroring your own. His back will begin to ache with the weight of the hammer long before his voice cracks and deepens. He'll learn to sleep through the incessant ringing in his ears, a constant echo of the anvil's song, and to wake before the first blush of dawn without ever being told. He'll quickly outgrow his shirts, but never the burn marks that will become a permanent part of his skin. And when your own body finally begins to fail, your knees creaking like old doors, your shoulders seizing, your lungs rasping, he will be there to carry the heavy hammer you can no longer lift. Some might whisper that it's unfair, that this brutal cycle should finally end. But this is how it has always been, a lineage forged in soot, steel, and the grim necessity of survival. You aren't merely passing down a trade. You are bequeathing a legacy, an ancient forge that, through generations, has never been allowed to cool. So yes, you raise your son to endure it all again, not out of cruelty, but because someone, always, must keep the fire burning. You've spent a lifetime standing too close to fire, swinging far too much iron, and breathing tragically little clean air. It was never a question of if your body would fail, but simply when. And now, the inevitable is happening. Your knees groan and creak like the timbers of an ancient ship caught in a storm. Your back, perpetually bent, refuses the simple dignity of straightening. Your fingers, once strong enough to bend raw steel, now tremble uncontrollably when you merely try to lift a cup of water to your lips. The forge still roars with its fierce, hungry song, but your arms no longer answer its call. The hammer, once an extension of your will, feels heavier with each passing day, as if it knows its time in your grip is drawing to a close. There will be no blaze of glory for you, no heroic finale, no epic ballad sung in your name. You simply slow down. The change is imperceptible at first, then undeniable. You begin, piece by piece, to hand over tasks to your son. You sit more, observe more, your gaze following his movements, a silent critic and mentor. He asks you questions, seeking your wisdom, and for the first time, you find yourself struggling, grasping at fading memories, to remember the precise answers. The villagers, ever practical, begin to seek him out directly now. They still offer you a respectful nod as they pass, a silent acknowledgement of your past labor, but their true inquiries, their urgent needs, are directed at your boy. He's the one with the fresh, still pink, calloused hands now. The burns are new on his skin, vivid and angry. The ancient ache of the craft, the burden of the forge, has shifted to his younger, stronger shoulders. And quietly, deep within your weary heart, you are fiercely proud. You were never wealthy. You never owned sweeping tracts of land, or a private library of leather-bound books, or fine clothes woven from exotic silks. But you were, in a way that transcended such mundane possessions, utterly necessary. You kept the swords of the guards sharp, the wheels of the carts turning, the village gates swinging on their sturdy hinges, and the farmers' plows ready to carve the earth. The world, in its hurried indifference, rarely offered thanks, but it moved, unmistakably, because of you. You likely won't see your 50th year. Most blacksmiths don't. The cumulative damage is too great. Lungs blackened and scarred from decades of inhaling smoke and coal dust, joints ground down to bone like iron rasping against stone, a heart worn out from constant heat and the relentless, physical effort. But when you are gone, your work will remain. The sturdy nails in the church doors, the gleaming blades at noblemen's hips, the iron shoes on the horses ready for the road. You will leave behind no grand titles, no inherited estates, just your well-worn tools, a body etched with the scars of a lifetime's labor, and a son who now wields your hammer. And that, in your harsh, demanding world, is more than enough. They may lay you to rest in a simple, unmarked grave, a patch of earth in the village common. No gold coins to line your pockets, no stone statue to commemorate your deeds, just a name roughly carved in wood, and a forge that continues to burn brightly in the collective memory of the village. But every resounding clang that echoes through the valley long after you're gone, every rhythmic strike of metal upon anvil, that is the sound of you still working, your legacy reverberating through time. You were never a knight, clad in shining armor, riding into battle with banners unfurled, catching the sunlight. But you forged that armor, piece by painstaking piece. You didn't farm the land, but you crafted the plows that carved its furrows. You didn't bake the bread, but you painstakingly hammered out the hinges for the oven doors. You didn't build the towering castle walls, but every single nail in its massive beams, every hinge on its formidable gates, every latch on its windows, they were all touched, purified, and strengthened by your fire. You were a blacksmith, and in the often brutal, always practical, medieval world, that meant absolutely everything. While nobles squabbled over land and kings endlessly changed crowns, you stood steadfast by your forge, day in and day out, shaping the very fabric of the world, one piece at a time. 1,000 small, often overlooked things, rivets, hooks, braces, buckles, chains, nothing that ever drew a cheering crowd, but everything that quite literally held the world together. Your life, filled with the thunderous clangs and roaring flames, was loud. But your legacy is quiet, woven into the very structure of daily existence. No court poet ever wrote songs about your mighty hammer. No wandering bard ever praised the perfect balance of your tongs. But every working wagon wheel that rolls down the dusty road, every unbroken sword that defends a home, every barn door that swings freely instead of falling from its frame, that, undeniably, was you. People walked past your forge and merely saw smoke curling towards the sky. They smelled the sharp tang of sweat and soot, and they mistakenly assumed that was all there was to you. But inside that grimy exterior, inside that roaring, blazing workshop, there was a profound symphony of incandescent heat and stubborn steel, a primal chorus of creation and unwavering endurance. You didn't just forge iron, you forged civilization itself. One horseshoe, one blade, one nail at a time. And now, long after your calloused hands have grown still, the fire you tended so faithfully continues to burn, inextinguishable. Your son, now a man, lifts your hammer. Your grandson, his eyes wide with wonder, begins to learn the fierce language of the heat. Your name might eventually fade from the fickle memory of men, but the tools you painstakingly built, the skills you honed, will carry on, passed from hand to hand, generation to generation. You were never crowned king, never honored by a grateful monarch, never celebrated in grand festivities. But without you, nothing moved. No carts rolled along the roads. No armies marched. No homes were truly secured against the wild. You were the unseen, foundational bedrock beneath the grand narratives of history books. You were the glowing ember beneath the stories of kings and queens, a silent, vital force. And that, in truth, matters more than anyone ever had the courage or wisdom to say aloud. Because in a world painstakingly built from wood, enduring stone, and sheer human willpower, you were the fire itself, the silent, relentless spark that turned raw, inert, or into the tangible, vital machinery of progress. You weren't just a part of the world. You were the indispensable engine that kept it turning, day after arduous day. Long before the enigmatic concept of alchemy became intrinsically associated with secretive European laboratories, cloaked figures, and robed mystics whispering over bubbling flasks, it was something far more profound, sacred, and infinitely more ancient. Its true, shimmering origin lies not in the mist-shrouded monasteries of medieval Europe, but in the shimmering, sun-baked heat of ancient Egypt, a civilization where the very notion of transformation was not merely a clever trick of nascent science, but a divine principle deeply etched into every corner of their understanding of life and, indeed, of death. The ancient Egyptians possessed a specific, resonant word for this profound concept, chamia. This term was elegantly derived from chem, meaning black land, a poignant reference to the rich, dark, fertile soil left behind by the annual, life-giving flooding of the Nile River. But this was far more than just a poetic nickname for their unique geography. It held a deep, almost mystical, spiritual significance. To the Egyptians, black was not merely a color. It was the vibrant hue of raw potential, of inherent richness, of primal matter lying dormant, patiently awaiting its inevitable transformation. Thus, the very land of Egypt itself became a powerful, living metaphor for the transformative, generative power of nature. It is from this root, from this deep well of ancient Egyptian thought, that the word alchemy, or alchemia as it would later be known, would eventually be born and spread. But alchemy in Egypt was initially far from the later, singular obsession with transmuting base metals into gold. That particular pursuit, the shimmering allure of literal gold, would only emerge much later in its complex history. For the ancient Egyptians, alchemy was not confined to a laboratory. It was woven into the very tapestry of their existence, pervasive and inescapable. It manifested in the elaborate, sacred ritual of mummification, where the physical body of the deceased was meticulously preserved, carefully transfigured, and prepared with divine reverence for its eternal journey into the afterlife. It was present within the hallowed halls of their magnificent temples, where high priests meticulously blended rare oils, potent herbs, and shimmering minerals into sacred elixirs and potent unguents used for ritual and healing. It was reflected in the celestial dance of the stars above, in the very richness of the soil beneath their feet, and even in the humble, everyday acts of cooking bread and brewing beer. Transformation, they believed with unwavering conviction, was not merely a process. It was the very language of the gods themselves. Indeed, Egyptian alchemy was never purely a physical endeavor. It was, at its absolute core, profoundly spiritual. The prevailing wisdom held that to truly change something outwardly, to bring about any meaningful external transformation, one first had to achieve a deep, intuitive, inward understanding of its essence. This foundational idea, this core philosophy of internal before external change, would echo through the succeeding centuries, resonating within alchemical texts and esoteric traditions from every subsequent culture that embraced the craft. Some ancient legends even whispered that these early Egyptian alchemists were not merely mortal men, but were directly guided by a divine figure, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of profound wisdom, arcane magic, writing, and the serene, watchful moon. According to these sacred myths, Thoth himself revealed the deepest secrets of creation, the intricate processes of transformation, and the soul's arduous, eternal journey beyond the veil of death. These paramount secrets, it was said, were not merely spoken. They were meticulously inscribed upon a mystical object, an artifact of immense power and enigma, known only as the Emerald Tablet. But before we delve into the mysteries of that legendary artifact, we must first truly recognize and internalize one overarching truth. Alchemy, in its pure, Egyptian form, did not begin as a frantic quest for material gold. It emerged, instead, as a sacred science of life itself, a profound exploration of existence. In Egypt, it was the primal fire, the spark of divine transformation, that gave rise to all other subsequent forms of alchemy. And indeed, everything that followed, every alchemical tradition that spread across the globe, from the sun-baked lands of Persia to the bustling, intellectual centers of Paris, would ultimately trace its ancient roots back to this ancient, fertile, and deeply mystical land. If ancient Egypt was truly the hallowed birthplace of alchemy, then Thoth was undeniably its divine midwife, its celestial guardian. In the intricate tapestry of Egyptian mythology, Thoth was far more than just a mere god among many. He was the preeminent deity of all knowledge, of potent magic, of the written word, of the relentless march of time, and indeed, of the very fundamental laws that govern the entire universe. Depicted with the elegant head of an ibis and often crowned by the luminous disk of the moon, Thoth embodied the crucial principle of equilibrium, of perfect balance. In a world utterly obsessed with cosmic order, with the intricate dance of creation and destruction, with the ceaseless nature of transformation, he stood as the sacred scribe, the keeper of all hidden truths, the archivist of the universe's profound mysteries. According to myth, Thoth didn't merely teach alchemy, he embodied it. The ancient Egyptians fervently believed he had personally authored thousands upon thousands of sacred books, scrolls brimming with divine wisdom and cosmic revelations. Most of these, it was understood, were never meant for mortal eyes, their truths too potent, too vast for human comprehension. Yet, one singular fragment of his immense knowledge, a mere whisper of his divine understanding, would ripple through history and utterly change its course. That fragment was the mysterious Emerald Tablet. Whispers of this legendary artifact have echoed through the vast corridors of time like a profound riddle, meticulously carved not into stone, but into the very bones of civilization itself. Said to be inscribed either upon a magnificent green crystal or a flawless emerald stone, the tablet itself was a deceptively short, intensely poetic text, barely a dozen lines long. Yet, those few, enigmatic lines were believed to hold nothing less than the ultimate key to transforming matter, purifying spirit, and reshaping reality itself. It famously begins with a sentence that has haunted and fascinated thinkers, mystics, and philosophers for centuries, an aphorism of cosmic significance. That which is above is like that which is below, and that which is below is like that which is above. This deceptively simple line, known as the principle of correspondence, suggests that the microcosm and the macrocosm are not separate entities, but rather perfect, intricate mirrors of one another. What unfolds in the vast, silent heavens above is intrinsically linked to what transpires within the complex depths of the human soul. What changes, transforms, or evolves within the contained environment of an alchemical laboratory echoes, in some profound, unseen way, within the boundless cosmos itself. The Emerald Tablet was not a mundane instruction manual for creating gold. It did not hand out step-by-step recipes for chemical reactions. Instead, it handed out an entirely new worldview, a paradigm-shifting philosophy. It declared that the world, far from being fixed and immutable, was inherently fluid, constantly in motion, eternally striving. Everything within it, it proclaimed, could be refined, elevated, transmuted. This wasn't merely about turning base lead into shimmering gold. It was a universal principle. Ignorance could be transmuted into profound wisdom, chaotic disorder into harmonious balance, the fleetingly mortal into the eternally divine. The tablet also speaks with evocative imagery of the one thing, a primordial source of all creation, and describes how it rises from the earth and descends from the sky, carrying the power of all things in its wake. Many later alchemists interpreted this enigmatic one thing as the mythical philosopher's stone, while others saw it as the very essence of the soul, the ethereal ether, or even, more abstractly, as consciousness itself. But perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding the tablet wasn't its cryptic content, but rather the question of who possessed the capacity to truly understand it. One had to be more than a mere scholar, more than a skilled linguist. One had to be a genuine seeker, a soul prepared to embark on a journey of self-discovery. And it was this sacred riddle, this profound gift bequeathed by Thoth, that would courageously survive the eventual fall of mighty Egypt, passing like an inextinguishable torch across countless borders and through successive ages, first igniting the minds of Persia, and then eventually the entire world. As the golden age of Egypt, with all its splendor and wisdom, slowly faded into the sands of time, alchemy, far from vanishing, embarked on a grand migration. It traveled along the ancient, sprawling trade routes, carried not just by goods and spices, but by the clandestine whispers of scribes, the profound insights of mystics, and the inexorable march of conquerors. It passed, like a precious, guarded secret, into the eager hands of another formidable ancient empire, Persia. But this was no mere passive transfer of existing knowledge. In Persia, alchemy underwent a profound transformation of its own, an evolution that deftly blended the spiritual fire of Egyptian tradition with a new, deeply resonant philosophical depth. The very backbone of Persian alchemical thought was profoundly shaped by Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest and most influential monotheistic religions. At its philosophical heart lay the powerful concept of duality, a constant, cosmic battle between the forces of light and impenetrable darkness, between undeniable truth and cunning falsehood, between inherent purity and corrupting pollution. Fire, considered the most sacred and purest of all elements within Zoroastrian belief, was not merely a symbol. It was a living, divine presence. It burned eternally in their temples, representing the unblemished flame of divine wisdom itself. And it was this sacred fire, imbued with such profound spiritual significance, that would come to light the very crucibles of the early Persian alchemists, their work imbued with a spiritual context. But while these profound spiritual ideas burned brightly within the Persian tradition, it was a remarkable Greek-Egyptian mystic by the name of Zosimos of Panopolis who truly gave alchemy its first clear, articulate voice, a voice that, even now, echoes powerfully through the centuries. Living within the complex tapestry of Roman Egypt during the 3rd or 4th century CE, Zosimos was no ordinary philosopher. His prolific writings were an astonishing fusion of meticulous, technical descriptions of furnaces, intricate stills, and the concoction of powerful elixirs, juxtaposed with strange, often terrifying, visionary journeys into the realms of the spirit. In his most famous and profoundly influential dream, Zosimos vividly recounts seeing himself dismembered, then burned, and finally transformed within the searing heat of an alchemical furnace. But rather than being a vision of horror or torment, this experience was unequivocally divine. It represented, for him and for those who followed, the symbolic death of the old self, the arduous and necessary purification of the soul, leading to a higher state of being. Zosimos fundamentally understood that alchemy was not just about changing metals. He believed, with unshakable conviction, that the alchemists themselves must undergo a profound, personal transformation. Just as base matter had to be broken down, dissolved, and reformed through fire and chemical processes before it could become gold, so too did the alchemist have to suffer, to purify their inner self, and to transcend their limitations. In his own evocative words, alchemy was a mystery of spirit and matter alike. He was among the very first to eloquently introduce the radical, yet ultimately enduring, idea of spiritual alchemy, a concept far ahead of his own time, which would profoundly influence all subsequent alchemical thought. Zosimos's writings are replete with strange, evocative symbols, ferocious lions devouring venomous serpents, human figures melting into shifting colored vapors, divine beings emerging, resplendent, from the heart of the alchemical fire. These were not mere chemical notations or formulae. They were rich, multi-layered metaphors, intricately woven narratives for the soul's arduous journey toward ultimate perfection and enlightenment. Zosimos was also one of the earliest voices to emphatically stress that true alchemical knowledge could not simply be bought with coin or memorized from texts. It had to be earned, forged through personal experience, rigorous discipline, profound suffering, and eventual divine revelation. The arduous path of the alchemist, he insisted, was a path of unwavering discipline, of inevitable suffering, and of profound, often startling, revelation. His intellectual and spiritual influence would ripple powerfully across centuries and continents, touching countless minds. And although many of his intricate texts were unfortunately lost to time or tragically misunderstood by later, less enlightened interpreters, one thing became unequivocally clear. Alchemy was no longer merely a rudimentary proto-science. Through Zosimos, it had been elevated. It had become a sacred philosophy, a comprehensive way of understanding the universe and humanity's place within it. As the smoldering embers of ancient knowledge flickered across the remnants of once great Egypt, the intellectual legacy of Greece, and the mystical traditions of Persia, a magnificent new empire rose, sweeping across the globe. And with its ascendance came a golden age of unparalleled wisdom and intellectual blossoming. Under the expansive, unifying banner of Islam, stretching from the 8th to the 13th century, a vast and vibrant intellectual renaissance began to unfold. While much of Europe was tragically descending into what would later be known as the Dark Ages, cities like the magnificent Baghdad, the scholarly Cairo, and the sophisticated Córdoba in Islamic Spain became vibrant sanctuaries, flourishing centers for philosophy, advanced mathematics, intricate astronomy, and, crucially, for alchemy. At the very heart of this intellectual revival stood a man whose name would become legend, etched permanently into the annals of scientific history, Jabir ibn Hayyan, known to the Western world by his Latinized name, Geber. More than a mere chemist, more than a simple philosopher, Jabir was a sublime fusion of both disciplines. Often revered as the father of chemistry, his groundbreaking contributions to alchemy were so profound, so revolutionary, that they effectively laid the very foundation for modern scientific methodology itself. Working diligently within the enlightened courts of the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th century, Jabir approached alchemy not as a collection of mystical incantations or obscure rituals, but as a structured, rigorously testable discipline. He systematically introduced laboratory methods that are not only recognizable, but still fundamental to scientific practice today, including meticulous distillation, precise crystallization, and efficient sublimation. He innovated and invented entirely new instruments, painstakingly refined powerful acids, and penned an astounding body of work, over 100 texts, seamlessly blending deep philosophical inquiry with rigorous chemical experimentation. Yet, despite his remarkably scientific approach, Jabir by no means abandoned the spiritual roots of the craft. Far from it. Jabir firmly believed that everything in the universe was intricately composed of specific combinations of the 4 classical elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and, crucially, that these elements were infused with inherent spiritual qualities. His complex system further incorporated a sophisticated blend of numerology, astrology, and profound symbolism. In his enlightened view, every single transformation observed in the material world meticulously mirrored a deeper, more significant transformation occurring within the human soul. Jabir also brilliantly introduced the revolutionary idea of balance, or mizan, as the absolute key to successful alchemy. Just as the human body needed to maintain a delicate equilibrium to remain healthy and vital, so too did metals need to be perfectly balanced in their elemental composition to attain perfection. Gold, in his understanding, was not merely a precious metal, it was matter itself, existing in a state of perfect, divine equilibrium. And if this perfect balance could be methodically achieved through careful, precise processes and rigorous experimentation, then even the most base and impure metal could be elevated, refined, and transmuted into its perfected form. Jabir's profound influence did not, however, remain confined within the borders of the Islamic world. Over time, his monumental texts were meticulously translated into Latin, gradually circulating throughout medieval Europe, igniting a powerful wave of Western alchemists who would eagerly build upon his teachings, often without even fully realizing that they were, quite literally, standing on the intellectual shoulders of a true Persian genius. Through the visionary work of Jabir ibn Hayyan, alchemy took its most decisive and monumental step forward. It was no longer simply a collection of sacred symbols or arcane mysticism. It had evolved. It was now a systematic method, a coherent system, a nascent science. And yet, despite this radical transformation, it remained, at its core, what it had always been: a profound map to ultimate transformation, both material and divine. As the Islamic world meticulously preserved, translated, and expansively built upon the accumulated knowledge of the ancients, much of Europe remained cloaked in the shadows of superstition and entrenched spiritual rigidity. Yet, knowledge, particularly when it possesses such potent power, possesses an inherent, irresistible way of traveling, of finding paths, especially when it is far too powerful to be contained by borders or dogmas. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, piece by painstaking piece, alchemy began its inexorable journey westward, carefully smuggled across vast distances through the medium of language, the enduring power of ink on parchment, and the often brutal, but sometimes transformative, force of conquest. The intellectual bridge between the East and the West was gradually constructed in vibrant, multicultural centers like Alexandria, that ancient beacon of learning once home to the greatest library, and later, the enlightened cities of Toledo and Córdoba in Islamic Spain, or Al-Andalus. Here, in these rare moments of profound intellectual harmony, Christian, Jewish, and Muslim scholars worked tirelessly side by side, sharing knowledge, and pursuing truth. Dedicated translators toiled with immense diligence over countless Arabic manuscripts, painstakingly decoding the intricate works of Jabir, the visionary Zosimos, and the classical philosophy of Aristotle, breathing forgotten ideas and lost wisdom back into the intellectual landscape of Europe. By the 12th century, Europe, having been starved of intellectual nourishment for so long, was ravenous for knowledge. The rediscovery of these ancient texts, particularly those pertaining to alchemy, was nothing short of a cultural detonation, a profound intellectual explosion that would forever alter its trajectory. But what ultimately arrived in Europe was not merely the practical science of chemistry alone. It was alchemy in its fullest, most complete form, a mesmerizing fusion of spirit, matter, and profound philosophical meaning. Monasteries, those bastions of religious thought, quietly began to hide strange, alchemical manuscripts behind their sacred scriptures, their cryptic diagrams and formulae a stark contrast to the divine texts. Monks, sworn to spiritual pursuits, began to experiment with metals, not simply with the aim of purifying them physically, but with the deeper, more profound intention of purifying themselves spiritually. And in hidden chambers, dimly lit by flickering candlelight, within secret monastic cells and scholarly studies, European minds began to obsess, with an almost feverish intensity, over one singular, captivating idea: transmutation. This was the audacious notion that base metals, like common lead, could somehow be elevated and transformed into precious, gleaming gold, and that, by extension, the imperfect human soul could undergo a similar, glorious metamorphosis into something divine. Among the most influential and enigmatic texts to reach Europe was the Tuba Philosophorum, or Assembly of the Philosophers, a mysterious dialogue among ancient sages supposedly discussing the deepest secrets of nature. Then came the Picatrix, a massive Arabic grimoire, a book of magic and arcane knowledge, filled to the brim with complex astrological calculations and profound alchemical symbolism. These works didn't simply pass on recipes or chemical instructions. They carried entire worldviews, comprehensive philosophies that challenged conventional thought. And those profound worldviews, once translated, planted potent seeds in the fertile ground of curious European minds. The Latin translations of these texts circulated quietly, often covertly, frequently disguised as innocuous religious or philosophical treatises to deftly avoid accusations of heresy. After all, alchemy, in its more radical interpretations, posed a significant threat to the established order. It dared to challenge the fixed, hierarchical nature of things. If base lead could become noble gold, then could a humble peasant potentially rise to become a lord? Could mere man, through alchemical effort, aspire to become divine? The Church, ever vigilant, watched with deepening suspicion, but alchemy's irresistible allure proved far too strong to suppress. It offered a hidden path to perfection, a secret route to enlightenment, lying tantalizingly outside the rigid confines of dogma, beyond the absolute authority of the established order. By the late Middle Ages, Europe had emphatically taken up the torch of alchemy. The sacred flame that had once burned brightly in the ancient temples of Egypt, glowed in the scholarly courts of Persia, and blazed in the intellectual powerhouse of Baghdad, now flickered with a renewed, fervent intensity within the cold, stone walls of castles, in the quiet, secluded scriptoria of monasteries, and in the secretive gatherings of nascent esoteric societies. Alchemy had successfully crossed a crucial threshold, transcending its origins, and it was poised to evolve once again into something even more mythic. By the late Middle Ages, alchemy in Europe had truly transformed, not just intellectually, but spiritually, into something almost mythic, deeply embedded in the collective consciousness. It was no longer merely an intellectual pursuit, a scholarly endeavor to understand the hidden mechanics of the universe. It had escalated into a profound, almost desperate, holy quest. And at the very heart of that quest, driving every scholar, Every mystic, every monarch who sought its power, lay one elusive object, one all-consuming idea, one singular, powerful obsession. The Philosopher's Stone. This legendary stone was far more than a simple chemical substance, a mere concoction. It was a profound mystery, intricately wrapped in layers of allegory, meticulously hidden within complex symbols, and eloquently cloaked in tantalizing riddles. Said to possess the unparalleled power to transmute the vilest base metals into the purest gold, and to grant eternal immortality through the elusive elixir of life. The Philosopher's Stone quickly ascended to become the most sought-after artifact, the ultimate prize, within the entire Western esoteric tradition. But to those few enlightened souls who truly understood the deeper, spiritual essence of alchemy, the stone was not, or at least not primarily, a physical object. It was, rather, a profound spiritual state, an internal transformation. In the cryptic manuscripts and encoded texts of alchemists, it went by myriad names: lapis philosophorum, the stone of the philosophers, the red stone, the powder of projection, or even the great work itself. Some literalists claimed it was a tangible, literal red crystalline substance, a physical artifact to be found or created. Others, more spiritually inclined, insisted it was a potent metaphor for spiritual awakening, for the ultimate purification and enlightenment of the human soul. Yet, despite these differing interpretations, all alchemists universally agreed on one fundamental truth. It was the absolute key to ultimate, transcendent transformation, whether of matter, mind, or spirit. European alchemists were often guided by an underlying belief that the universe itself was a living, breathing organism, constantly striving, in its own slow, cosmic way, toward a state of absolute perfection. Metals, too, they believed, were living entities, slowly growing and maturing within the nurturing womb of the earth over vast eons. Lead, in this worldview, was not inherently base or worthless. It was simply immature gold, gold that had not yet reached its full, perfected potential. And just as nature, in its infinite wisdom, slowly evolved toward balance and perfection, so too could man, through the rigorous discipline of alchemy, evolve and ascend to a higher, more refined state of being. The Philosopher's Stone, therefore, was seen as the supreme accelerant of this universal evolution, a catalyst for both cosmic and personal transformation. Prominent European alchemists, figures like the esteemed Albertus Magnus, the visionary Roger Bacon, and later, the enigmatic Paracelsus, dedicated their entire lives to meticulously understanding the intricate processes of nature in their relentless pursuit of this ultimate truth. They tirelessly built elaborate furnaces, carefully studied the complex alignments of astrology, painstakingly collected rare and potent minerals from the earth, and filled countless volumes with cryptic texts brimming with symbolic imagery. Serpents devouring their own tails, radiant suns and moons, fearsome dragons, and majestic kings. All metaphors for the complex stages and profound transformations inherent in the great work. All metaphors for the complex stages and profound transformations inherent in the great work. The creation of the fabled Philosopher's Stone was said to follow a sacred alchemical path known as the magnum opus, or great work. This arduous journey mirrored the soul's own quest for perfection, commencing with nigredo, the blackening. This initial phase symbolized death, decay, and the essential breaking down of the ego, a descent into the primordial chaos from which new order could emerge. Following this crucible came albedo, the whitening, representing purification, cleansing, and the illumination of the inner self. Then arrived citronidas, the yellowing, often associated with spiritual awakening and the dawning of intellectual and psychic clarity. Finally, the journey culminated in rubedo, the reddening, a stage of profound rebirth, spiritual integration, and the glorious emergence of the Philosopher's Stone itself, radiating wholeness. But why shroud such a profound process in layers of metaphor and cryptic symbolism? Alchemists firmly believed that true, transformative knowledge was not meant for the casual seeker or the uninitiated. The stone, both literal and metaphorical, would reveal itself only to those who were truly ready, not just intellectually prepared, but deeply and unequivocally spiritually attuned. To embark upon the quest for the stone was, ultimately, to seek perfection. And while countless individuals throughout history pursued the creation of literal gold, the wisest alchemists understood that the only substance truly worth perfecting was the human soul. As the intricate philosophy of alchemy began to take deeper root across medieval Europe, it inevitably retreated into the shadows. What was once a subject of open dialogue in ancient temples and scholarly exchanges within enlightened courts gradually transformed into a hidden, often perilous, practice. The reasons for this shift were multifaceted and compelling. Religious scrutiny, profound political fear, and the undeniable fact that alchemy's esoteric language had evolved into a secret code, decipherable solely by its initiates, forced its concealment. The Church, a formidable power in medieval Europe, viewed alchemy with a complex blend of both promise and profound danger. On one hand, some Christian mystics cautiously embraced it, interpreting the transmutation of base metals into noble gold as a tangible mirror of Christ's resurrection and the potential for spiritual renewal. On the other hand, a far more powerful faction vehemently condemned it. The very notion that man could manipulate nature, or worse, achieve spiritual ascension and divine grace outside of the established ecclesiastical channels, was deemed nothing short of heresy. To escape the very real threat of persecution, imprisonment, or even death, alchemists meticulously cloaked their sacred teachings in elaborate allegories, intricate symbolism, and deliberately obscure texts. Thus began an era where alchemy was forced underground, finding sanctuary within secret societies, coded manuscripts, and enigmatic symbols that only a select few insiders could truly interpret. Among the most intriguing were the Rosicrucians, a mysterious brotherhood whose existence first surfaced in the 17th century. They claimed to be inheritors of an ancient alchemical wisdom, a lineage tracing back through the mystical traditions of Egypt and Arabia. Their manifestos, enigmatic and inspiring, spoke not of material riches but of spiritual enlightenment, divine harmony, and the unlocking of hidden sciences. Though no definitive proof of their physical existence was ever truly established, their ideas ignited the imaginations of countless seekers, spreading like wildfire across Europe. Then there were the Freemasons, whose organizational roots trace back to medieval guilds of stone builders, but whose rituals and philosophical underpinnings echoed deeply with alchemical tenets: purification, transformation, and the pursuit of inner light. Regardless of whether they practiced alchemy in a literal, laboratory sense, their rich symbolic language aligned perfectly with its core aims: the arduous, lifelong process of building and perfecting the self. Alchemy also found cunning refuge in books of secrets. One of the most famous, the Mutus Liber, or Mute Book, contained no words at all. Instead, it comprised a series of strange, symbolic images designed to communicate the entire great work visually, bypassing the need for a single written sentence that could be misinterpreted or confiscated. Other manuscripts were written in green language, a sophisticated form of wordplay, puns, and poetic double meanings that ingeniously concealed their deeper, alchemical truths within seemingly innocuous texts. The life of an alchemist, therefore, often became one of profound duality. Outwardly, they might present as respected scholars, physicians, or even cloistered monks, quiet, obedient, and unremarkable. Inwardly, however, they were revolutionaries of the spirit, ceaselessly chasing the divine through the transformative power of fire and metal, spirit and stone. The very secrecy that continually threatened alchemy with obscurity paradoxically ensured its preservation. Like a precious fire carefully buried beneath a layer of ash, it smoldered unseen, passed down through whispers and coded instruction from master to apprentice, generation to generation. And in these quiet, hidden shadows, alchemy continued its evolution, not merely as an early form of scientific inquiry, but as a living, breathing philosophy. However, this ancient wisdom was soon to encounter its greatest existential challenge, the unstoppable birth of modern chemistry. By the 17th and 18th centuries, a quiet yet profound intellectual revolution was brewing across Europe, one that would both inherit the methodological legacy of alchemy and, at the same time, systematically bury its mystical heart. The Age of Enlightenment had arrived, bringing with it a radical shift in how knowledge was pursued and validated. The mysticism, metaphor, and allegorical thinking that had once cloaked alchemical thought were no longer welcome in the burgeoning scholarly halls and burgeoning universities. In their place came a new, rigorously defined scientific language, empiricism, logic, and the unwavering demand for repeatable, measurable results. Alchemy's intellectual successor had arrived, and its name was chemistry. This was not an abrupt, violent execution. Rather, it was a slow, methodical transformation, a gradual redefining of focus and methodology. Tellingly, many of the earliest and most influential chemists were, in fact, former alchemists. They simply shifted their focus. The ultimate goal was no longer spiritual perfection, the transmutation of the soul, or the creation of legendary elixirs, but instead, the pursuit of measurable, observable change in matter. No more fearsome dragons guarding cryptic secrets or symbolic black suns, just precise beakers, accurate balances, and meticulously documented experiments. One of the final, decisive nails in alchemy's scientific coffin came with Robert Boyle, often rightfully hailed as the father of modern chemistry. In his groundbreaking 1661 book, The Skeptical Chemist, Boyle delivered a seismic blow to alchemical theory. He meticulously argued that matter was composed of tiny, fundamental particles, atoms, and that chemical reactions could be fully explained through mechanistic principles, entirely without recourse to mystical forces or ancient allegories. Crucially, Boyle didn't outright mock or dismiss alchemy. Instead, he methodically stripped it of its esoteric language and its spiritual claims. Boyle believed deeply in the alchemist's power to transform substances, but he adamantly insisted that such transformations must be explained and understood through natural laws, not through veiled allegory or divine intervention. Soon after, the brilliant Antoine Lavoisier would definitively discover the critical role of oxygen in combustion, effectively disproving the ancient and long-held theory of the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. The subsequent development of the periodic table further solidified this new, empirical understanding of matter. Laboratories, once resembling mystical workshops, rapidly became secular temples of knowledge, dedicated to observable fact. Alchemy, with its hidden codes and sacred metaphors, was increasingly viewed as outdated, a charming but embarrassing relic of a less enlightened age, a stark contrast to real science. But herein lies a profound paradox. Modern chemistry, in its very essence, owed its existence to alchemy. The foundational tools, the alembics, retorts, furnaces, and glassware, the experimental techniques, the patient observation, and the underlying insatiable curiosity about the nature of matter, all sprang from the fiery crucible of that ancient craft. Alchemy had painstakingly walked, meticulously laying the groundwork, so that chemistry could eventually run, unbound by mystical interpretation. Yet, the world around them was relentlessly changing. The dawn of industrialization brought with it new demands. Results were paramount, not riddles. Efficiency was prized over esoteric knowledge. Governments began to fund meticulously organized laboratories, not clandestine lodges. The quest for the philosopher's stone was gradually replaced by the precise optics of the microscope, the alchemical alembic by the efficient flame of the Bunsen burner. What was once imbued with sacred meaning had, in the rapidly advancing modern age, become fundamentally material. Yet, not all was truly lost. In hidden corners, within quiet, contemplative minds, the spirit of alchemy still breathed. It persevered, not as a literal science of material transformation, but as a potent, enduring symbol, a symbol of profound personal transformation, of cosmic unity, of the eternal, intricate dance between matter and spirit. And while the burgeoning world increasingly turned to chemistry for concrete answers and material solutions, a discerning few continued to look to alchemy for deeper meaning, for understanding of the self and the universe that transcended mere empirical data. For some fires, once kindled, never truly go out. They merely continue to burn, unseen, beneath the surface. Alchemy, in its ancient form, may indeed have vanished from the hallowed halls of conventional science, but it never truly died. Instead, it transformed itself, just as its core teachings always maintained that all things must. What originated in the shadowed tombs of ancient Egypt was meticulously refined in the blazing fire temples of Persia and later encoded in the hidden, symbolic texts of medieval Europe did not simply disappear into oblivion. It evolved, subtly splintering and influencing a multitude of modern disciplines. The very foundations of chemistry, the depths of psychology, the complexities of medicine, and even the myriad paths of contemporary spirituality. Its outward, literal form was shed, but its profound inner message endured, persisting through the ages. In the early 20th century, a new, unexpected kind of alchemist emerged, not with a roaring furnace or bubbling retorts, but with a meticulously kept notebook and a mind brimming with dreams. Carl Jung, the visionary Swiss psychologist, rediscovered the obscured wisdom of alchemy and breathed new, vibrant life into it. Jung compellingly argued that the ancient alchemists were not merely attempting to transmute base metals into gold. Rather, they were unconsciously mapping the intricate, profound processes of the human psyche. He saw direct parallels. The blackening of Nigredo represented the descent into psychological depression, despair, and the confrontation with the shadow self. The whitening of albedo mirrored the process of gaining insight, achieving clarity, and purifying the unconscious. The reddening of rubedo, for Jung, symbolized the birth of a unified, individuated self, the integration of all disparate parts of the personality. The legendary philosopher's stone, Jung proposed, was not a physical object at all, but rather individuation itself, the lifelong, transformative process of becoming truly whole, complete, and fully realized. Alchemy, it turned out, had always been about something infinitely more valuable and profound than mere material gold. Today, we continue to see its enduring fingerprints everywhere. In countless self-help books advocating personal transformation, in the timeless archetypal stories of heroes who descend into profound darkness only to return reborn, fundamentally changed. It echoes in the very language we use daily. Words like refine, distill, and purify are direct linguistic legacies of the alchemist's meticulous path. Even within cutting-edge science, the spirit of alchemy subtly lingers. Modern chemists still transmute elements, albeit through nuclear reactors, creating new atomic structures. Physicists speak of elusive dark matter and unified fields with the same profound wonder and intellectual fervor that alchemists once reserved for concepts like ether and quintessence. The fundamental human search for the underlying building blocks of the universe persists. Only the language and methodology have evolved. But perhaps the most enduring and vital legacy of alchemy lies in its unwavering insistence on wholeness. It fundamentally refused to separate spirit from matter or empirical science from profound mystery. It taught that any genuine, lasting transformation of the external world must invariably begin with the internal transformation of the self. It proposed that behind every experiment, every meticulous observation, lay a sacred, deeply personal question. Who are you becoming in this process? In a contemporary world often driven by unrelenting speed, by ever-advancing technology, and by the cold, impersonal precision of data, alchemy quietly whispers an ancient, profound truth. that to truly change anything of significance, one must first be profoundly willing to change oneself. And so, the alchemist's transformative fire still burns, not in material crucibles or glowing furnaces, but deep within human hearts, waiting, calling, and forever transforming. Because alchemy was never just a science. It was, and remains, a mirror to the soul. At first glance, Cappadocia presents itself as a surreal, almost otherworldly painting. Its vast, volcanic landscape is majestically dotted with towering stone chimneys, often called fairy chimneys, and gracefully rippling ridges, all intricately carved by millennia of relentless wind and patient time. Tourists flock to this region, marveling at the strange, captivating beauty that unfolds above ground. Yet, what most visitors never truly realize is that the real, astonishing wonder of Cappadocia lies hidden beneath their very feet. Deep beneath this striking Turkish landscape exists a forgotten world, a bewildering labyrinth of subterranean cities stretching for miles, a silent testament to ancient ingenuity. These are not mere simple caves or makeshift shelters carved into the earth. They are entire, intricately planned urban complexes, meticulously hidden underground, complete with fully functional residences, solemn chapels, crucial wells, vast food storage chambers, sturdy stables for livestock, and even dedicated schools for children. Some of these incredible cities plunge as deep as 18 stories below the surface, designed to house thousands upon thousands of people in the profound shadows of the earth. The most astonishing aspect of all, many of these vast subterranean metropolises remained completely unknown to the outside world until the mid-20th century. A dramatic discovery unfolded in 1963 when a local man, undertaking simple renovations in the basement of his home in the town of Derinkuyu, quite literally knocked down a wall. What he found behind it was not the expected brick or dirt, but a dark, gaping tunnel stretching beyond his sight. That tunnel, he soon discovered, led to another, then to a spacious chamber, and then to a dizzying spiral staircase that plunged deep into the earth. He had, quite by accident, stumbled upon an ancient, long-forgotten entrance to one of the largest and deepest underground cities ever found in the world. It was as if an entire civilization had consciously chosen to vanish beneath the ground, leaving behind no overt signs of its presence, only in profound, echoing silence. Yet, Derinkuyu was just one extraordinary example among many. Over the subsequent decades, archaeologists have painstakingly identified hundreds of underground settlements scattered throughout Cappadocia. At least 40 of these are major complexes, many believed to be interconnected through a vast network of narrow corridors and secret escape routes. These were clearly not random, panicked burrows. They were deliberately, brilliantly planned and engineered. Massive, circular stone doors, designed with ingenious precision, could be rolled into place to seal off crucial passageways from the inside. Sophisticated ventilation shafts brought fresh, circulating air from the distant surface to even the deepest levels. Wells expertly tapped into underground aquifers, ensuring a constant supply of fresh water, even under prolonged siege. The haunting question lingers. Why would anyone undertake such an elaborate, monumental effort to construct entire cities beneath the earth? That question has profoundly haunted historians and archaeologists for years. Theories abound, each more intriguing than the last. Were these complex subterranean cities simply hiding spots from invading armies that frequently swept through central Anatolia? Were they monastic refuges, secret spiritual sanctuaries where ancient rituals could be practiced in peace? Or were they something far older, far stranger, built in response to a threat we can barely conceive of today? Whatever the ultimate reason, one truth is abundantly clear. Cappadocia was not merely a geographical region. It was, for its inhabitants, a vital refuge, a complex world beneath a world, a sanctuary where thousands could disappear from the surface entirely and live their lives in the hidden depths. And the deeper one goes into the silent heart of these cities, the stranger and more compelling their story becomes. To truly begin to comprehend why the people built such elaborate cities beneath Cappadocia, we must first understand the very land itself. For Cappadocia is no ordinary terrain. It is a geological marvel forged in fire and time. Millions of years ago, a catastrophic series of violent volcanic eruptions violently buried central Turkey under immense layers of ash and pumice. Over eons, that ash gradually hardened into a unique, relatively soft, porous rock known as tuff. This remarkable material possessed ideal properties for ancient builders. It was light enough to be carved with relatively basic tools, yet incredibly strong enough to hold its intricate shape and structural integrity for centuries, even millennia. The relentless forces of rain and wind then sculpted this pliable rock into the region's iconic, strange, and breathtaking formations. The towering, fairy chimneys, the conical towers, the whimsical, mushroom-like spires that the landscape. The entire region presents a vista that feels like something torn directly from a vivid dream or perhaps transplanted from a different planet altogether. But the ancient people who settled here did not merely marvel at the rock. They instinctively understood its profound potential and worked with it. Early settlers quickly realized that this volcanic stone was an extraordinary gift. They could meticulously carve out homes, chapels, vast storage rooms, and even entire multi-room complexes without the need for precious timber or labor-intensive bricks. And unlike surface dwellings, these carved stone chambers offered unparalleled advantages. They stayed refreshingly cool during the scorching, oppressive summers and remarkably warm during the biting, freezing winters, providing natural, year-round climate control. Above ground, they carved intricate churches and monasteries into sheer cliff faces, demonstrating their artistic and religious devotion. But it was below ground where the true magic of their engineering and ingenuity truly happened. It is highly probable that the process began humbly, with simple caves, small, expedient hideaways to store vital food supplies, to escape the intense heat of summer, or to shelter from violent storms. But over time, as external threats grew more severe and as communities expanded in size and complexity, those initial caves grew too. They evolved organically into interconnected rooms, then into multiple distinct levels, and eventually into vast, sprawling underground networks. And once the arduous digging began, it seemed it simply did not stop. Entire societies literally vanished beneath the soil, carving deeper and deeper, not in a chaotic or random fashion, but with profound intention and meticulous design. Intricate tunnels connected homes to communal kitchens, stables for livestock to essential wells, and private rooms to sacred chapels. They expertly engineered elaborate ventilation shafts that snaked their way to the surface, filtering fresh air through multiple subterranean stories, a feat of ancient air circulation. They even dug vertical staircases wide enough to accommodate both people and livestock, yet strategically narrow enough to be easily defended against intruders. What is truly incredible is the immense antiquity these structures may possess. While many underground cities were undoubtedly expanded and heavily utilized during the Byzantine era, some archaeologists now believe that the original, deepest levels, especially in pivotal sites like Derinkuyu and Kamakli, could potentially date back to the formidable Hittite Empire, or even earlier, possibly around 2000 BCE, pushing their origins into the Bronze Age. This unique land, therefore, didn't just invite settlement, it actively invited profound transformation. And the resourceful people of Cappadocia responded by shaping it, not with advanced machines, but with extraordinary patience, visionary foresight, and an unwavering focus on long-term survival. The earth was not merely a foundation upon which to build. It was a living shelter, an impregnable fortress, a second sky, only inverted and filled with profound, ancient secrets. But precisely what, or whom, were they hiding from with such monumental effort? That haunting question is what we delve into next. Beneath the quiet, unassuming town of Derinkuyu in Cappadocia lies something truly extraordinary. It is not a city perched proudly above the earth, but one carved deep beneath it, a vast metropolis that no one in the modern world even knew existed until that fateful year of 1963. It was then that a local man, engaged in what he thought were routine renovations in his home, knocked down a plaster wall in his basement. What he discovered behind it was neither simple brick nor common dirt, but a dark, gaping tunnel stretching beyond his sight into the unknown. That tunnel led to a series of interconnected chambers. Those chambers, in turn, led to winding corridors. Staircases spiraled downward, meticulously carved into the solid rock, leading from room to room, level to astonishing level, until eventually, explorers found themselves standing an incredible 18 stories beneath the surface. They had accidentally uncovered Derinkuyu, which proved to be the largest and deepest underground city ever found in Cappadocia, and quite possibly the world. What archaeologists eventually unearthed there was nothing short of staggering. This was clearly no temporary hideout or emergency shelter designed for fleeting use. Derinkuyu was a thriving, living city meticulously carved entirely out of the region's soft volcanic stone. It boasted well-defined homes for families, sacred churches, expansive communal kitchens, wine and olive oil presses, vast storage rooms for provisions, dedicated schools for children, and even a baptismal chamber for spiritual rites. Experts estimate it could comfortably house an astonishing 20,000 people, along with their vital livestock and enough food supplies to last for months, if not years. It was engineered with truly remarkable foresight and precision. Massive rolling stone doors, shaped like enormous millstones, could be quickly pushed into place to seal off critical tunnels in the event of an attack. These were not mere crude blocks. They were perfectly fitted, could only be moved from the inside, and were nearly impossible to force open from the exterior, forming an impenetrable barrier. Ingenious ventilation shafts snaked upward through the solid rock, delivering a constant supply of fresh, circulating air to even the deepest subterranean levels. Strategically placed wells accessed underground aquifers, providing a crucial and secure water source without the need for residents to ever surface. There was even a mission school, complete with study rooms and communal areas, suggesting that the primary purpose of this city transcended mere physical survival. It was equally dedicated to continuity, to teaching, to worship, and to preserving a vibrant community. But here is what makes Derinkuyu and similar sites so utterly mysterious. We genuinely do not know who first built it, or precisely why. Some historians believe it was extensively expanded by early Christian communities seeking refuge from relentless Roman or, later, Arab persecution. Others argue that the deepest foundations are far older, perhaps dating back to the Phrygians or even the mighty Hittites, millennia before the time of Christ. Why would any civilization go to such extraordinary, monumental lengths to disappear so completely underground? Was it solely to escape human invaders, as many theories suggest? Or was the threat they so meticulously prepared for not human at all, but something far more primal and terrifying? Derinkuyu holds no inscriptions, no names etched into its walls, no definitive timeline, only an echoing maze of rooms, tunnels, and unanswered questions. And even today, much of it remains unexplored, its deepest secrets still held tight within the earth. Because the deeper one descends into its silent depths, the less it feels like a mere city, and the more it feels like something else entirely, a vast, deliberate concealment. Building downward into the earth is, in many ways, far more complex and challenging than building upward toward the sky. There is no natural sunlight, no easy scaffolding, no wide, open skies for guidance. Just solid stone and an omnipresent shroud of shadow. And yet, the anonymous architects of Cappadocia's underground cities did not merely dig. They designed with truly remarkable intelligence, foresight, and precision, creating intricate spaces that could sustainably support thousands of lives for not just days or weeks, but for months, perhaps even years at a time. These cities were emphatically not chaotic tunnels burrowed in panic. They were meticulously planned systems, layered like a colossal onion. each level serving a distinct and crucial purpose. Living quarters were often strategically located closer to the surface, allowing for quicker, easier access to the outside world when danger inevitably passed. Deeper levels housed vital communal kitchens, workshops for various crafts, vast food storage areas, and livestock pens, all strategically placed to minimize the risk of contamination or the spread of fire throughout the city. One of the most profound and ingenious features of these subterranean complexes was their sophisticated ventilation system. Long, meticulously carved vertical shafts plunged through the solid rock, expertly designed to allow air to circulate naturally through as many as 18 underground levels. Some of these shafts extended over 50 meters deep, yet they were so perfectly placed and engineered that fresh, breathable air could reach even the lowest chambers without the aid of fans, without electricity, relying solely on the principles of gravity and brilliant design. Water was another critical key to long-term survival. The cities were typically built around naturally occurring aquifers, ensuring that wells could be accessed directly from within, guaranteeing that even during a prolonged siege, residents would not need to emerge to secure this most vital resource. In some cities, the well shafts were ingeniously sealed off from the surface entirely, a critical defense mechanism to prevent deliberate poisoning by attackers. There were also communication tunnels, some leading to smaller, satellite chambers for outlying communities, others connecting directly to nearby underground cities. In times of acute danger, messages, or even small groups of people could be moved stealthily through the earth itself. The defense mechanisms, while deceptively simple, were extraordinarily effective. Narrow corridors that inherently forced any invader to approach single file, creating natural choke points. Cleverly disguised trapdoors that could be dropped from above. Hidden escape routes leading into secluded valleys or dry riverbeds. Most famously, of course, were the rolling stone doors, massive, round slabs of rock, weighing many tons, that could be rolled into place to seal off a passage in mere seconds. From the outside, they blended seamlessly into the rock face, appearing as just another part of the wall. From the inside, they represented the ultimate, unbreakable last line of defense. Every single decision, every deliberate design choice, pointed to one inescapable truth. These cities were built for sustained survival, not for fleeting refuge, but for long-term habitation under an extreme, existential threat. Which naturally raises the haunting question: what kind of danger, precisely, required this unparalleled level of preparation? And was that danger ever truly gone, or does it still linger, a shadow in the deep past? For centuries, scholars and curious minds have asked the same haunting question: who were the people of Cappadocia truly hiding from? What kind of existential threat was so profound, so terrifying, that it drove entire populations to dig themselves into the earth, not just for temporary shelter, but to establish permanent, hidden lives? The most common and widely accepted theory points to invaders. Central Anatolia, the historical heartland of modern Turkey, was a veritable crossroads of empires, a strategic battleground for millennia. From the ancient Assyrians to the mighty Persians, from the formidable Romans to the sophisticated Byzantines, the region was perpetually under threat from foreign armies. Later, the waves of Arab raids during the early Islamic period would undoubtedly compel many Christian communities to seek deep refuge underground. Derinkuyu and Kaymakli, in particular, may have served as crucial sanctuaries during these prolonged periods of violence, allowing people to literally disappear into the living rock and patiently wait for the storm of danger to pass. However, there is a significant and persistent problem with this singular theory. The sheer depth, the intricate complexity, and the monumental scale of these underground cities strongly suggest that they were not constructed in a rushed, desperate act of panic. This was not merely a temporary, reactionary measure. It was clearly a meticulously conceived, long-term plan, requiring generations of relentless digging, sophisticated engineering, and continuous refinement. Furthermore, compelling evidence indicates that some of the deepest and oldest chambers appear to predate Christianity entirely. So, if not for Christian persecution, who built the first foundational layers? Some historians tentatively trace the earliest tunnels back to the formidable Hittite Empire, nearly 4,000 years ago, based on pottery findings. Others suggest the Phrygians may have expanded them centuries later. But beyond these educated guesses and tantalizing clues, the archaeological record largely grows silent. There are virtually no inscriptions, no explanatory carvings, no direct, unambiguous evidence telling us precisely who first vanished beneath the surface, or what unspeakable terror they were desperately running from. That's where the more speculative, sometimes chilling, theories begin to take hold. Some researchers believe these cities were constructed not to escape other human beings, but something else entirely. They posit threats such as catastrophic natural disasters, devastating solar events, or even ancient, technologically advanced warfare that may have scarred the very skies and poisoned the land above. Even more fringe theories venture deeper, suggesting that the cities were built to hide from entities not of this world, the kind of powerful, awe-inspiring beings spoken of in ancient myths and legends across diverse cultures: sky gods, watchful destroyers, or unseen predators. The idea is undeniably tempting and lends a chilling undertone to the sites. If you consider the extraordinary level of secrecy embedded in their design, the air shafts cleverly disguised from surface view, the intricate escape routes leading into hidden crevices, the massive, impenetrable stone doors, it almost feels as if the builders were desperately trying to disappear completely, to become utterly undetectable. It's as if whatever they feared didn't merely attack, it hunted methodically and relentlessly. While these more audacious ideas undeniably remain speculative, they powerfully reflect the central, enduring mystery of Cappadocia. No matter how many subterranean layers archaeologists painstakingly uncover, the core question remains tantalizingly unanswered. Who were they hiding from with such unparalleled dedication? And ultimately, did their monumental efforts truly work? Because sometimes, the deeper you dig into the past, the darker and more unsettling the truth becomes. Imagine living, not just for a single day, but for months, perhaps even years, entirely underground. No comforting sunlight, no expansive open skies above, just solid, enclosing stone walls, the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps, and the ever-present, profound hush of life lived beneath the earth. This was the stark, yet remarkably organized, reality for thousands of people in Cappadocia during prolonged periods of intense threat. But what did daily life actually look like within the silent, sprawling confines of these vast underground cities? Despite the perpetual darkness, these subterranean spaces were far from lifeless or stagnant. They pulsed with a carefully structured routine, meticulously designed for communal survival and the preservation of an entire way of life. Families resided in multi-room compartments, providing a measure of privacy. Communal kitchens were strategically located on lower levels to more efficiently manage and vent the smoke from cooking fires, which would have billowed from clay ovens. The faint, comforting scent of baked bread undoubtedly mingled with the damp, earthy smell of carved stone and the pungent, living presence of livestock. There were sacred churches and chapels, often carved with elaborate crosses and altars, some even adorned with intricate frescoes, demonstrating that spiritual life was sustained and cherished. People didn't merely survive in these depths. They prayed, worshipped, practiced ancient rituals, and celebrated their faith. There were designated communal areas for meetings, schooling rooms for children, and long, winding corridors that echoed with hushed voices and the soft shuffle of footsteps. Lighting, though minimal, came from countless oil lamps, dozens of them carefully scattered along passageways and within living spaces, casting dancing shadows. Smoke from these lamps and kitchens was channeled upward through the cleverly designed shafts that ingeniously doubled as the city's ventilation system. Yet, life here was undeniably challenging. Fresh air, while present, was always limited. Darkness was a constant, all-encompassing reality, and silence, when it finally fell, could be absolute and profoundly disorienting. Precious water was drawn from deep wells, painstakingly tunneled into the natural underground aquifers. Grain was meticulously stored in sealed, cool chambers to prevent spoilage and ensure long-term provisions. Wine presses and olive oil vats, expertly carved directly into the rock, have also been discovered, strongly suggesting that even in their hidden world, life had its flavors, its rituals, and its small, vital comforts. These cities were unequivocally built for the long haul. They were not a desperate, last-minute resort, but a meticulously prepared reality. Livestock, sheep, goats, chickens, were kept in dedicated pens, typically situated near the entrance levels for easier management and more efficient ventilation. Their presence served a dual, critical purpose, providing both food and a source of body warmth in the cool stone chambers. Despite the often confined spaces, the ancient builders possessed a profound understanding of the psychology of communal survival. Rooms were laid out in ways that afforded families essential privacy, while shared communal spaces fostered a vital sense of community and shared purpose. Life underground was not solely about hiding. It was, profoundly, about preserving a way of life, an entire culture, and the very continuity of a people. It is a truly humbling thought. While wars raged and empires clashed violently above ground, entire civilizations quietly continued their existence below, meticulously hidden in profound silence. People married, taught their children, mourned their dead, and celebrated new life, all within these silent, secure stone chambers, illuminated by the flickering glow of fire. To live underground was not to live merely in fear. It was, undeniably, to live with profound intention. Cappadocia's extraordinary underground cities were never isolated pockets of desperate refuge. They were, in fact, part of something much larger, a testament to coordinated, monumental effort. Beneath the captivating valleys and undulating hills of this volcanic region lies a vast, intricate network of tunnels, chambers, and hidden passageways that intricately connect multiple cities together. Sites like Derinkuyu, Kemakli, Oskanak, and others may not have simply been separate, independent settlements, but rather integral pieces of a unified, expansive subterranean civilization. Some of these remarkable tunnels stretch for kilometers, weaving beneath the countryside like hidden veins beneath the skin of the earth. Often narrow, winding, and sometimes no wider than a man's shoulders, they were undoubtedly used for secret movement, as critical escape routes, or even for transporting vital messages and supplies from one underground complex to another. Derinkuyu and Kemakli, two of the largest known cities, are believed by archaeologists to be linked by just such a tunnel, stretching for an astonishing nearly 9 kilometers. This is not merely impressive engineering. It is irrefutable evidence of coordinated planning on a scale rarely seen in ancient architecture. If true, it means that multiple cities could actively support one another in times of prolonged siege or acute crisis, functioning almost like a sophisticated, decentralized underground federation. Crucially, these tunnels were not just for utility and connectivity. They were also formidable defensive structures. Meticulously engineered with multiple bottlenecks, blind turns, and strategic choke points, they effectively forced any pursuer to enter one at a time, making them extraordinarily easy to trap or ambush in the claustrophobic darkness. Many tunnels were also ingeniously rigged with concealed trap doors and massive stone corks that could be rolled into place to instantly block intruders. Still, the full extent and precise layout of these vast networks remain largely unknown. New passageways and hidden chambers are still being discovered, decades after the initial finds. In 2014, an even larger underground complex was accidentally uncovered beneath Nevsur, the provincial capital, with initial estimates suggesting it could potentially dwarf even the immense Derinkuyu. Archaeologists believe it may contain dozens of levels, elaborate aqueducts, multiple places of worship, and countless more tunnels yet to be fully mapped or explored. What were these tunnels truly for? Were they merely simple escape routes for transient populations, or were they the fundamental infrastructure of a society built, from its very inception, to live without ever being seen by the world above? The more we painstakingly uncover, the more we realize that Cappadocia's underground isn't just a scattered collection of homes and halls. It is a meticulously planned, interconnected system, a hidden world concealed beneath our feet for thousands of years. And perhaps, just perhaps, there is still so much more waiting to be discovered. Entire cities buried not by the inexorable march of time, but by the profound, deliberate intention of their long-vanished builders. Because in Cappadocia, the earth doesn't just hold on to secrets, it actively, fiercely protects them. Despite decades of painstaking excavation, intensive study, and relentless exploration, Cappadocia's enigmatic underground cities remain profoundly wrapped in mystery. The ancient stone walls themselves may stand silent, but the questions they evoke echo louder than ever, resounding through the silent depths. Cappadocia's enigmatic underground cities, despite decades of painstaking excavation, intensive study, and relentless exploration, remain profoundly wrapped in mystery. The ancient stone walls themselves may stand silent, but the questions they evoke echo louder than ever, resounding through the silent depths of time and rock. The inquiry extends far beyond mere engineering prowess. It delves into the fundamental human impulse, not just how these sprawling subterranean complexes were built, but why such immense effort was undertaken. And when conventional historical answers prove insufficient, myths and alternative theories surge in, eager to fill the profound void of understanding. Among the most persistent and unsettling questions is that of the true age of these monumental hidden settlements. Conventional archaeology often links their most significant expansion and population boom to the Byzantine period, a tumultuous era when early Christians desperately sought refuge from relentless, invading forces. These underground labyrinths offered a haven from persecution and warfare. Yet, a growing number of researchers propose a much more ancient origin, suggesting that the earliest tunnels and chambers could date back 4,000 years or even further into prehistory. If this radical redating holds true, a chilling question emerges. What kind of existential threat, what unimaginable terror, existed so long ago that it compelled entire populations to abandon the light of the surface world and burrow deep into the earth? This unsettling query opens the door to a multitude of theories. Some propose that these subterranean cities served as immense emergency shelters, constructed in anticipation of or response to natural cataclysms of apocalyptic scale. They envision scenarios of massive, devastating floods that scoured the surface, solar flares that incinerated everything exposed, prolonged volcanic winters plunging the world into darkness, or ancient climatic disasters that rendered life above ground unsustainable. The meticulously planned layout of these cities, designed to be self-sufficient, expertly hidden, and capable of being sealed off completely, could indeed be interpreted as long-term survival bunkers, prepared with foresight for an impending environmental collapse of epic proportions. Others gravitate towards more cosmic explanations. Ancient astronaut theorists, for instance, posit that early civilizations might have constructed these elaborate underground refuges to conceal themselves from entities they revered or feared as gods, powerful beings who, according to their lore, descended from the heavens and exercised fearsome dominion over humanity. Could these intricate underground cities have functioned as a strategic shield, a protective barrier against something not of this earth, a force far beyond human comprehension or resistance? Local legends, passed down through countless generations, also offer tantalizing, albeit terrifying, clues. One such legend speaks of colossal giants that once roamed the surface world, their presence so overwhelming and threatening that it drove people deep underground for safety. Other tales recount fire from the heavens and fearsome enemies that came with burning eyes, images that still stir primal fear. To the modern ear, These narratives might easily be dismissed as mere metaphors, poetic embellishments, or memories distorted by centuries of oral tradition. Yet, they collectively hint at a terrifying reality, a genuine and profound threat potent enough to compel entire cultures to carve out a new existence within the solid rock itself. Beyond the practical and external threats, some theories delve into the very symbolism of the earth itself. In various ancient traditions, the act of descending into the ground was not merely a physical movement, but a profound spiritual journey into the underworld, representing a metaphorical death followed by a spiritual rebirth. Could these cities have been sacred spiritual sanctuaries, hallowed places of ritual transformation, designed for profound rites of passage? Or, perhaps even more unsettling, were they never truly abandoned, but, rather, forgotten on purpose, their very existence erased from surface memory as a deliberate act of concealment? The truth, as it stands, is that no single theory, however compelling, fully explains the sheer scale, the incredible age, and the astounding precision evident in Cappadocia's underground cities. Their existence simply doesn't fully fit into our existing historical frameworks or conventional narratives of human development. And perhaps that is the most unsettling part of all, because sometimes what lies hidden isn't just history waiting to be discovered. It's the dizzying edge of something we were never truly meant to understand, a boundary of human knowledge that whispers of something vast and ancient. Today, visitors to Cappadocia walk through landscapes that feel dreamlike, traversing valleys sculpted by the relentless wind, past fairy chimneys that glow a warm orange in the soft light of the evening sun. Hot air balloons drift quietly overhead, painting the sky with serene colors. But beneath their very feet, the ground is hollow, a silent testament to ancient struggles. Beneath the breathtaking surface beauty lies a world carved in darkness, a world that seems to be still holding its breath, patiently awaiting discovery, after thousands of years of silent vigilance. The most accessible of these underground cities are now open to curious tourists. Visitors descend narrow, winding stairwells, pass through low-arched tunnels that echo with the muffled sounds of the present, and stand in vast, silent rooms where people once lived, loved, and waited for danger to pass, often in complete darkness, with only the flicker of oil lamps. And yet, what has been uncovered for public viewing is only a minuscule fraction of the whole. Many chambers remain hermetically sealed, their secrets perfectly preserved. Some tunnels simply collapse into impenetrable shadow, their depths unexplored. Other doorways lead, or so it seems, to absolute nowhere, dead ends that mock the curious mind. These aren't just ruins, they are profound testaments. They are proof of the indomitable human spirit, a testament that people will do whatever it takes to survive, to protect their children, to preserve their most cherished beliefs, and to vanish completely from sight when the world above turns relentlessly hostile. And in that ultimate act of vanishing, they inadvertently left behind a silent, powerful message, not written in language or script, but indelibly etched in solid stone. We may never know their names, nor fully comprehend their individual stories, but we know this much. They were ingenious planners, masterful engineers, and profound visionaries. They forged something that could not only endure centuries of silence and abandonment, but something that might have been explicitly meant never to be found at all. Cappadocia reminds us, with stark clarity, that history isn't always laid out on the surface for easy consumption. Sometimes, the most profound and vital truths are buried on purpose, hidden from conquerors, hidden from the merely curious, and perhaps hidden even from the inexorable march of time itself. And what remains in the wake of such a legacy? Mystery. Mystery in the perfect, airtight fit of the massive rolling stone doors, designed to seal passages completely. Mystery in the meticulously engineered air shafts that still pull a faint, chilling wind from the deepest, unexplored reaches of the earth. And mystery, most of all, in the countless miles of unexplored tunnels, still untouched, still perpetually dark, their secrets waiting for an age yet to come. Perhaps the real, ultimate purpose of Cappadocia's incredible underground world will never truly be known. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully understood by outsiders. But as you walk through those ancient chambers, with the immense weight of countless tons of rock pressing in from above, and the profound silence enveloping you, you feel something ancient stirring within your own soul, a palpable presence, a faint whisper, not of fear, but of an unimaginable endurance. Because when the world above them was consumed by chaos and terror, the people of Cappadocia looked down into the steadfast embrace of the earth and chose to survive, together, in the dark. And the earth, it seems, has kept their secret remarkably well. To the ancient world, sleep was far more than a mere escape from the exhausting realities of waking life. It was considered an entryway into something deeper, a sacred threshold to other dimensions of existence. Dreams weren't summarily dismissed as random thoughts, fleeting fantasies, or mere figments of an overactive imagination. On the contrary, they were taken with profound seriousness. In fact, they were widely regarded as potent messages, sometimes dire warnings, sometimes auspicious prophecies, and often direct, unambiguous communications from gods, goddesses, or powerful ancestral spirits. For virtually all ancient civilizations, the perceived boundary between the physical, tangible world and the spiritual, intangible realm was not a sharp, impermeable line. Rather, it was porous, permeable, and during the transformative state of sleep, that boundary grew astonishingly thin. The very act of dreaming was steeped in sanctity, cloaked in mystery, and frequently imbued with a sense of awe, even terror. It was during those quiet, vulnerable hours of the night that the divine could most easily reach into the human mind, bypassing the conscious filters. And what it whispered, or roared, into that receptive mind could irrevocably shape the course of a king's monumental decision, dictate the intricacies of a priest's ritual, or even determine the ultimate fate of an entire city. In almost every early culture known to us, from the fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia to the grand temples of Egypt and the vibrant polis of Greece, dreams held an extraordinarily elevated status. People genuinely believed they were being visited not by the ephemeral phantoms of fantasy, but by real, potent forces carrying real, tangible consequences. Dreams possessed the power to foretell a coming war, to reveal a hidden betrayal, to offer miraculous healing, or to demand a solemn sacrifice. To ignore a powerful, vivid dream wasn't just seen as foolish or negligent. It was considered dangerously disrespectful, an affront to the divine, potentially incurring dire spiritual repercussions. The dreamer, therefore, was not merely a sleeper seeking rest. They were transformed into a messenger, a conduit, a temporary vessel whose mind was open to cosmic truths. And in certain extraordinary cases, that dreamer became a revered prophet, specifically chosen and blessed by the gods themselves. Entire professions, highly respected and integral to society, were devoted solely to the understanding and interpretation of dreams. Priests, shamans, oracles, and seers all underwent rigorous training to learn the intricate art of reading the complex symbols and narratives that emerged during the night. A seemingly simple image like a snake in a dream could hold vastly different meanings. It might be a symbol of profound transformation and renewal in one context, or a deadly, inescapable omen of impending doom in another. A rising sun could promise glorious victory or deceptive illusion, again, entirely dependent on the specific context and surrounding imagery. Each culture developed its own unique codes and interpretative lexicons, but the fundamental belief was universal and unwavering. Dreams truly mattered. Even today, faint fragments of that ancient wisdom linger in our language. We speak of following our dreams or waking up to a profound realization. But in the ancient world, dreams were not merely poetic expressions or abstract aspirations. They were perceived as literal maps, urgent warnings, and sacred intelligence, delivered with utmost gravity while the conscious mind lay dormant. This was the world as it existed before the advent of Freud, before the discovery of REM cycles, before modern science began its earnest attempts to measure and rationalize what the ancients already inherently feared and deeply revered. Because to them, the dream world was not metaphor, it was startlingly real. And to walk through its ethereal landscapes was, quite literally, to walk with gods. The first civilization known to have left comprehensive written records of dreams were the Sumerians, a highly advanced society that flourished in Mesopotamia over 5,000 years ago. They fundamentally did not view dreams as random images or neural firings. To them, dreams were direct, unfiltered transmissions from the divine realm, often complex, rich with symbolism, and profoundly consequential for both individual and community. Among the sun-baked ruins of their ancient cities, archaeologists have unearthed countless clay tablets meticulously etched with dream narratives, some deeply personal, others carrying significant political implications. Dream interpretation was not a novelty or a casual pastime. It was a structured, highly respected practice, taught, studied, and honored within their society. Sumerian kings maintained court dream interpreters, highly skilled men specifically trained to decipher the often cryptic messages of the gods, whose interpretations held immense sway and could quite literally influence the fate of entire cities and empires. One of the most famous and enduring examples of this ancient dream culture lies within the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest surviving literary works. In this foundational epic, both the mighty King Gilgamesh and his wild companion Enkidu experience vivid, deeply symbolic dreams. Before embarking on their perilous journey to slay the monstrous Humbaba, Gilgamesh dreams of titanic celestial battles and terrifying collapsing mountains. These visions are not ignored. They are diligently interpreted by his wise mother, Nin-sun, and by temple priests as potent divine warnings and veiled prophecies, offering crucial sacred guidance for their dangerous quest. The Sumerians firmly believed there were primarily two types of dreams: those unequivocally sent by the gods to offer help or instruction, and those that were empty, mere echoes or residues of the day's events, devoid of divine significance. Determining which was which required the profound wisdom of a trained priest or diviner. Individuals who possessed the unique ability to read omens, decipher symbols, and perceive hidden patterns within the intricate imagery of sleep. Temples often featured special chambers where priests, or even the kings themselves, would sleep in hopes of directly receiving divine visions. This ritualistic practice, known later in other cultures as incubation, may well have originated with the Sumerians. These sacred dreams were seen as oracles, sometimes even more trustworthy and reliable than waking signs or omens. Dreams could also serve as powerful political tools. A ruler who could convincingly claim to receive divine dreams could significantly strengthen his legitimacy, reinforce his authority, or justify major, sometimes controversial, decisions to his populace. The pronouncement, "The gods told me in a dream," was not merely a spiritual statement. It was an undeniable assertion of power. In the Sumerian worldview, the entire universe was alive with profound meaning, and dreams were its esoteric language. Every image, whether a raging storm, a formidable lion, or a falling star, carried cosmic significance. And in a land where gods were believed to walk among men, to dream was, quite literally, to listen. To ignore those dreams was to recklessly risk the wrath of the heavens themselves. To the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not just messages. They were potent portals, direct pathways to the gods, tantalizing glimpses into the mysterious afterlife, and sometimes explicit instructions for the living. In a culture deeply obsessed with eternity, where every facet of life was viewed through the lens of immortality, sleep was never merely a time of physical rest. It was considered a profound rehearsal for death, and dreams were understood as vital communications emanating from the realm beyond. Egyptian texts, meticulously preserved on papyri and temple walls, reveal that dreams were regarded as both deeply personal experiences and powerfully prophetic pronouncements. Like the Sumerians, Egyptians categorized dreams into two distinct kinds: truth dreams, sent by the gods or spirits to guide, heal, or warn, and false dreams, which were seen as misleading, malevolent, or simply born of bodily imbalance or earthly anxieties. Temples dedicated to powerful gods like Serapis and Thoth were renowned for their practice of dream incubation. Worshippers would journey to these sacred sites, sleeping within the hallowed temple walls in the earnest hope of receiving divine dreams. These potent temple dreams were frequently recorded, diligently interpreted by specialized priests, and in some extraordinary cases, even carved into enduring stone monuments for posterity. Remarkably, a person might receive not just visions, but literal healing through these dreams. One of the most fascinating artifacts illustrating this belief is the Ramesside Dream Book, a papyrus scroll dating to around 1300 BCE. This ancient manuscript is essentially a comprehensive catalog of dream symbols and their corresponding meanings, listing over 100 common dreams, each meticulously paired with its interpretation. For example, if a man saw himself eating crocodile flesh in a dream, it was interpreted to mean he would gain ultimate power over his enemies. Another entry, starkly, warned that dreaming of drinking warm beer foretold impending sorrow. These interpretations were taken with the utmost gravity and faith. Pharaohs, military generals, and high priests alike all sought the counsel of professional dream interpreters, who acted as crucial intermediaries between the dreamer and the divine. Egyptian mythology also intimately linked dreams to the Ka, the spiritual double or soul. During sleep, the Ka was believed to leave the physical body and freely travel to other realms, including the afterlife. What it encountered there then returned to the dreamer as visions. Sometimes these were comforting visions of loved ones long dead, or profound encounters with gods bearing vital messages. Occasionally, however, dreams were considered unwelcome visits from malevolent spirits, prompting the recitation of protective spells to keep such dark forces at bay. Even in the intricate tomb inscriptions of pharaohs, dreams appear as crucial events. Kings meticulously described how gods came to them in the night, offering divine sanction for their rule or vital guidance for their enduring legacy. In the land of pyramids and pantheons, dreams were not illusions. They were sacred revelations. And to dream was to step, however briefly, into the eternal. In ancient Greece, dreams occupied a unique and complex space, existing at the fascinating intersection of medicine, profound mythology, and nascent philosophy. To the Greeks, dreams transcended mere personal experience. They were viewed as cosmic messages, divinely delivered by powerful gods, revered heroes, or even unsettling forces from the mysterious underworld. But unlike earlier civilizations, the Greeks also began to ponder the deeper philosophical question of why humans dream, planting the very first seeds of psychological thought. The most sacred and renowned place for dream revelation and healing in Greece was the Asclepion, a healing temple consecrated to the god Asclepius, the divine physician. Pilgrims, suffering from various ailments, journeyed from across the vast Mediterranean world to sleep inside these hallowed sanctuaries in a ritual known as incubation and enkomesis. Before their sacred slumber, they would meticulously purify their bodies through bathing, rigorous fasting, fervent prayer, and sometimes offering sacrifices, all to prepare their bodies and souls to receive potent, healing dreams. In these dreams, it was believed that Asclepius himself would appear, often in the form of a serpent, directly diagnosing their illness or prescribing a miraculous cure, sometimes even performing astonishing dream surgery. Temple priests, known as therapeutai, were trained dream interpreters who would listen intently to the pilgrims' accounts upon waking, translate the divine messages, and prescribe tangible treatments based on what the gods had revealed. This potent blend of medicine and mysticism was highly respected and remarkably effective, or at least it appeared to be. The walls of Asclepions were covered with countless inscriptions, votive tablets called pinox, thanking the gods for miraculous recoveries and profound healings. But dreams in Greece were not solely for healing. They also held immense political and prophetic significance. In Homer's timeless epics, dreams often come directly from the king of the gods, Zeus himself. In the Iliad, Zeus sends a deceptive dream to King Agamemnon to influence his battle strategy against Troy. In the Odyssey, Queen Penelope speaks famously of two gates of dreams, one made of horn, through which true dreams emerge, and one of ivory, from which come only lies and deceptions. Dream interpretation consequently became a respected and specialized craft. Philosophers like the astute Aristotle and the enigmatic Heraclitus pondered the very nature of dreams, questioning whether they originated from divine sources or simply from the inner stirrings of the human soul. Meanwhile, Artemidorus of Daldis, a renowned 2nd century C.E. dream interpreter, authored the Oneirocritica, a colossal 5-book manual on how to systematically decode dreams based on the dreamer's profession, gender, social status, and the inherent symbolism of the dream itself. His seminal work was referenced and revered for centuries. The Greeks deeply believed that during sleep, the soul loosened its tight grip on the body, floating in a liminal state where it could glimpse deeper truths and communicate with other realms. Whether sent by the gods or born from inner reflection, dreams were never considered meaningless. To the Greeks, to dream was not just to passively see visions. It was to momentarily touch the divine mind, to gain access to a profound, sacred intelligence. In the ancient world, dreams were not merely reflections of the waking mind. They were very often believed to be powerful, unambiguous prophecies. Many ancient civilizations saw the dream state as a unique space where the conventional linearity of time unraveled, allowing the future, however subtly, to bleed into the present. To dream was sometimes to witness fate itself before it had fully arrived. And that extraordinary knowledge carried both immense power and a profound, often terrifying, responsibility. Across Sumer, Egypt, and Greece, history is replete with accounts of rulers, revered generals, and venerated prophets who made monumental decisions based entirely on their dreams. One wrong interpretation could cost a kingdom its very existence. One correct reading could irrevocably change the course of history for generations. In Mesopotamia, vivid dreams featuring celestial omens, falling stars, dark, eclipsed suns, or rivers running blood-red were seen as dire signs of coming war or catastrophic disaster. Priests meticulously kept detailed records of these prophetic dreams, diligently looking for recurring patterns that might predict the fate of empires. These records weren't merely stored away. They were actively consulted during times of crisis and uncertainty. The Egyptians, too, viewed dreams as sacred divine warnings. Pharaoh Thutmose famously claimed that his entire reign was foretold in a dream, a vivid vision in which the great Sphinx itself spoke to him, promising him kingship if he cleared the desert's sand from its body. Whether this was historical fact or brilliant political storytelling, that dream profoundly secured his legitimacy in the eyes of his people. In the Greek world, prophetic dreams played out on the bloody battlefield and in the hushed, tension-filled political chambers. Before making major decisions, leaders eagerly sought omens, either through direct dream incubation in sacred sites or by consulting renowned oracles like those at Delphi, who often entered trance states and dreamed as part of their ritualistic divinations. Even Alexander the Great was said to have dreamed of the Egyptian god Serapis before conquering Persia, taking it as an undeniable sign of divine favor and ultimate victory. But prophecy wasn't exclusively for kings and generals. Everyday people also believed dreams could foretell crucial life events: marriage, childbirth, impending illness, or death. Artemidorus' Oneirocritica included thousands of such interpretations: dreaming of losing teeth, a sign of a death in the family; dreaming of flight, a sudden, dramatic change in fortune; The pervasive belief in prophetic dreams gave ordinary people a deeply personal sense of access to the divine, a fleeting glimpse into the hidden threads of fate. But it also created intense anxiety. What if you missed a critical warning? What if you profoundly misunderstood a divine message? In a world where gods whispered in dreams, sleeping wasn't just a private act of rest. It was a fraught, sacred conversation with destiny itself. In the ancient world, healing didn't always come from potent herbs or the cold blades of surgeons. Often, it came directly from dreams. Sacred healing sanctuaries, widely known as dream temples, existed across many ancient cultures. Here, the sick and suffering didn't merely seek conventional medicine. They sought profound divine intervention. And the miraculous treatment often began not with potions or poultices, but with the deliberate act of sleep. The most famous of these were the Asclepians in ancient Greece, dedicated to Asclepius, the benevolent god of healing. But this practice was far from a Greek invention alone. Earlier civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia also harbored the deeply held belief that dreams could reveal miraculous cures or offer profound spiritual purification. These temples were not places to escape illness. They were hallowed grounds to directly encounter the source of healing, often through a divinely inspired dream. The ritual process was called incubation, *encoemesis*. A pilgrim would meticulously purify their body through rigorous fasting, ritual bathing, or a solemn sacrifice before lying down to sleep in a sacred chamber, usually at night, within the temple precinct. The goal was simple yet profound: to dream with intent, to open the self completely to divine contact and reception. In these sacred dreams, gods or spirits would appear to the dreamer, offering direct advice, prescribing specific cures, or even performing astonishing dream surgeries. Some dreamed of snakes, the sacred symbol of Asclepius, coiling gently around their ailing bodies. Others saw themselves bathed in radiant light or felt the gentle touch of divine hands. When they awoke, the temple priests, themselves highly trained dream interpreters, would listen intently to their accounts, translate the often symbolic messages, and prescribe specific actions based on the dream's revelation. Sometimes it meant drinking a special herbal brew, walking a certain path, or offering thanks with a sacrifice. In some cases, the dream itself was considered the healing, its visionary power enough to restore health. These temples were neither isolated nor fringe institutions. Thousands of people visited them annually. Inscriptions etched into temple walls speak of countless miraculous recoveries: blindness cured, raging fevers broken, chronic pain lifted. Whether these healings were purely physical, psychosomatic, or deeply spiritual, the immense power of belief and the dream experience was undeniable. Dream healing transcended cultures. In Egypt, people visited the temples of Serapis or Imhotep, seeking similar nighttime revelations. In Mesopotamia, temples dedicated to Gula, the compassionate goddess of medicine, offered designated spaces for dream divination and ritual sleep. What united all these practices was a shared, fundamental belief. The body and soul were intimately connected, and the soul spoke its clearest truths in the language of dreams. Healing, therefore, wasn't just about mending the flesh. It was about achieving harmony between the human and the divine. In these sanctuaries of profound silence, dreams weren't merely seen as stories. They were revered as powerful medicine. In the ancient world, the elusive realm of dreams was not only a place of prophecy or healing. It was also a sacred space where the dead could, remarkably, still speak. Many ancient civilizations held the profound belief that dreams provided a rare and hallowed moment when the veil separating the living from the departed grew astonishingly thin. To dream of a beloved, long-departed family member or friend was not perceived as a simple expression of grief or a nostalgic memory. It was often sincerely believed that the spirit of the deceased had truly returned, reaching out from the afterlife, bearing vital messages, offering urgent warnings, or conveying unresolved requests. These dream encounters were immensely powerful, deeply emotional and considered profoundly significant events. In Egypt, where the afterlife was central to their entire belief system, dreams were thought to offer a direct and unimpeded link to the underworld. The soul, or Ka, was believed to travel freely during sleep, capable of even visiting the dead. If a deceased family member appeared in a dream, it could signify they were displeased, in need of offerings to sustain them in the afterlife, or simply reaching out with crucial guidance. Egyptians sometimes wrote letters to the dead, leaving them in tombs or shrines, asking for protection or help, fervently hoping the request would be answered through the medium of a dream. In Mesopotamia, dream encounters with the dead were treated with a mixture of deep reverence and cautious apprehension. The dead were believed to retain considerable power in the afterlife, and a dream visitation could be a potent sign that something was amiss in the realm of the living, perhaps a neglected burial ritual, an unfulfilled vow, or an unaddressed injustice. These dreams were often followed by ritual purification rites or offerings to set things right and appease the spirits. The Greeks, too, took dreams of the dead with utmost seriousness. In Homer's epic Odyssey, Odysseus descends into the underworld, the Nikeia, and speaks with the spirits of the fallen, a vision that powerfully mirrored what many believed could, and often did, happen during the vulnerable state of sleep. The philosopher Heraclitus once famously said, "The waking have one world in common, but the sleeping turn aside each into a world of his own." That private, internal world was precisely where the dead could slip through, bridging the divide. Even beyond Europe and the Middle East, numerous other cultures across the globe held remarkably similar views, that the dead were not entirely gone, and that dreams were their preferred language of communication. When the voice of a lost parent or child spoke clearly in the night, it wasn't poetic metaphor. It was, to the ancients, strikingly real. To them, sleep was not merely a place to forget the day's troubles. It was where the past could still reach out, sometimes to offer solace, and sometimes to poignantly ask to be remembered. To ancient civilizations, dreams weren't just messages. They were intricate puzzles, rich with mysterious symbols, strange creatures, impossible events, and celestial signs. Dreams were believed to carry a highly coded language directly from the divine realm. Interpreting them was far from easy. It required specialized training, profound intuition, and often elaborate ritual. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, professional dream interpreters operated almost like high priests or revered shamans. They studied vast collections of dream records, meticulously memorized the intricate meanings of symbols, and possessed the sagacity to distinguish between a true, divinely sent dream and a meaningless, mundane one. Their interpretations held immense weight and could profoundly influence public policy, medical treatments, and even the strategies of warfare. Across these diverse cultures, certain dream symbols appeared again and again, and they were almost never literal. A snake, for instance, might signify mortal danger in one dream, yet symbolize profound transformation or healing in another. Seeing fire could be a dire warning of imminent destruction, or it could represent spiritual purification and renewal. Flying might symbolize the soul breaking free of earthly burdens and limitations, or it could simply express a deep, subconscious longing to escape something difficult in waking life. In Egypt, comprehensive dream books meticulously outlined hundreds of these symbols. Dreaming of drowning might signal an emotional storm about to overwhelm the dreamer. Seeing oneself blind could foretell a powerful spiritual awakening or the painful revelation of a hidden truth that had been long ignored. These interpretations were not mere guesses or arbitrary associations. They were part of a vast, ancient language of symbols, refined and expanded over countless generations. In Greece, Artemidorus of Daldis, through his monumental Oneirocritica, compiled a 5-volume manual of dream analysis. He crucially emphasized that dream interpretation was not universal. Context mattered immensely. A farmer dreaming of a flood meant something profoundly different than a sailor dreaming the exact same image. The Oniricritica is one of the earliest known texts to explicitly suggest that personal experience and social context significantly shape dream meaning, a remarkably modern and insightful idea for the 2nd century CE. Dream interpretation was also intrinsically tied to the broader practice of divination. Dreams were seen as one vital thread in a complex web of omens, signs, and sacred messages. Dreamers might consult oracles, draw lots, or perform ritual offerings to clarify what they had seen and its implications. Some even diligently kept dream journals, inscribed on papyrus or clay tablets, not just for personal insight, but to share these divine communications with their community and contribute to the collective wisdom. For ancient people, symbols were not just subconscious images or abstract representations. They were profound keys, an integral part of a divine language whispered to them in the profound silence of sleep. And truly understanding that language meant unlocking the very will of the gods, deciphering the forces of fate, and plumbing the deepest secrets of the human soul. To the ancients, a dream wasn't just a story. It was a cosmic message in code, sent directly from the stars. Today, we often treat dreams as fleeting fragments, strange, often nonsensical images that are quickly forgotten after we wake, or at best, material for therapists and artists to explore. But to the ancients, dreams were far, far more than mere mental noise. They were sacred, structured, and deeply respected. They offered invaluable guidance, brought miraculous healing, facilitated profound connection with the departed, and provided awe-inspiring glimpses of the divine. Dreams were an inextricable part of the very fabric of life, seamlessly woven into the practices of medicine, the tenets of religion, and the decisions of governance. So, what happened to this profound understanding? As science and rationalism ascended, particularly in the post-Enlightenment West, dreams were systematically reclassified. No longer seen as direct messages from the gods, they became neurological byproducts, random electrical impulses, fragmented memories, or mechanisms for emotional processing. The sacred was reduced to the clinical. The deeply symbolic was flattened and reduced to the merely chemical. Yet, even now, in moments of profound grief, significant life change, or deep intuition, dreams still carry an undeniable weight. We still instinctively search them for meaning. A dream of a lost loved one can bring unexpected closure or a sense of enduring connection. A recurring nightmare can powerfully reflect unresolved stress or a difficult truth we consciously refuse to face. Modern psychology, spearheaded by pioneering figures like Freud and Jung, later attempted to reclaim some of that ancient understanding, recognizing that dreams intrinsically hold immense power, even if we no longer choose to call it divine. What the ancients inherently understood, and what we perhaps still dimly perceive, is that the dream world is not truly separate from life. It is a profound and vital mirror, reflecting not only our most intimate fears and deepest desires, but something immeasurably bigger, something eternal, something that transcends the waking self. In an age when the material world held fewer answers and the mysteries of existence pressed close, dreams served as an indispensable conduit. They were the primal oracle, delivering messages that the clamor of daily life could never convey. Whether a divine utterance echoing from the profound darkness, a vital omen forecasting the ferocity of tomorrow's storm, or the tender, guiding whisper of a beloved parent long interred, dreams provided an unparalleled access point. They offered precisely what the waking world, with all its structured societies and tangible realities, simply could not. A raw, unfiltered conversation with the unknown, a direct line to the ineffable. Perhaps, then, this is our most profound modern forfeiture. We have surrendered the sacred humility required to genuinely listen, to yield to the subtle urgings and profound narratives that sleep perpetually endeavors to impart. In our relentless pursuit of empirical data and our steadfast faith in the visible, we have gradually, almost imperceptibly, sealed off this ancient channel. We've traded a vast, internal landscape for the brightly lit, yet often shallow, stage of waking consciousness, dismissing anything beyond its immediate grasp as mere ephemera or the random firing of neurons. Yet, tracing the indelible marks of human history across every scattered tribe and towering civilization, one foundational belief persists with unwavering constancy. It is a truth woven into the very fabric of human experience. Dreams are not mere chaotic detritus of the mind. They are, and always have been, profound portals, not accidental byproducts of a resting brain, but deliberate apertures, doors, leading not only into the deepest strata of the individual psyche, but also, perhaps, into the collective unconscious, into ancestral memory, or even into realms beyond the immediate grasp of our five senses. Thus, the truly potent inquiry is not whether these nightly journeys possess a tangible reality in the waking sense, for their impact undeniably shapes our inner world and outer actions. The real question, the one that truly defines our engagement with this ancient mystery, is far more challenging. Are we willing to step through these enigmatic thresholds? Are we brave enough to traverse the landscapes they reveal, to confront the shadows they illuminate, and to embrace the truths, however unsettling, that lie on the other side? It demands a profound act of courage, a readiness to abandon the familiar shores of consciousness and venture into the vast, often turbulent, waters of the soul. Indeed, etched into the very stones of every ancient temple, inscribed upon fragile scrolls and weighty clay tablets, we encounter a recurring, resonant whisper, a timeless directive echoing from the dawn of human self-awareness. Pay attention. It is a sacred injunction to not merely rest, but to actively engage with the nocturnal drama. Close your eyes, these ancient texts implore, not in an act of forgetting the intricate tapestry of the world, but rather to truly begin to comprehend its deeper patterns, its hidden currents, and its enduring mysteries. For in the cessation of external stimuli, a different kind of perception awakens, because only in the profound, sacred silence of night, when the incessant clamor and insistent demands of the waking world finally recede, do we stand a chance of truly hearing. We might then, perhaps, finally grasp what the Sumerians, the Egyptians, and the Greeks instinctively understood, what countless indigenous cultures worldwide have always revered, that dreams are not merely fleeting echoes of a busy mind, random neural fireworks, or the brain's simple processing of daily events. No, they are far more profound, far more essential. They are the very language of the soul, a direct, symbolic, and often startlingly clear articulation of our deepest self, speaking truths that defy the logic and limitations of our conscious reality.